to be able to?
I think we didn't have
So what?
to cancel
You're going
it.
to be able to come tonight after?
We'll see. We're going to try to get this done in 2 hours.
God, I.
We
don't have anything.
Right, he just participated in my advice to you.
Okay,
That little agreement.
looks like
You were going to redraft.
Bob is coming, no, Bob Page is here.
It's going to settle itself out.
That's how I was getting that gist from.
Let's give him a minute. I saw him. Bob Page. Okay. Okay, I understand. Yeah, yeah.
By the way, you have the best wife. Angelic.
Sorry, folks, we're holding you up, but we want to make sure Director Page is able to be here in a minute. There he is. Okay. I'm going to call a meeting to order. And I'm going to add in our pledge to the flag, so if you would all stand with me. And Peter, would you lead us?
Would you join me in pledging your allegiance to the United States of America? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. This is a time for public comments. It's reserved for the public to address the board on matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone wishing to make a comment, please come forward. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. I am Stan Rotora. I have 3 quick comments to make. The first one involves well measurements. I believe a few months ago, maybe as much as a year ago, this group talked about trying to have the Kern Water Agency over here more often to give us well measurement data. That's very critical to understanding our problem, and the public needs to understand what the issues are. Since that time, I don't believe we've had any involvement by the Kern Water Agency, and we all pay property taxes, and they're on our property tax bill. I would hope that we could get someone over here to give us a report on what's really happening to the wells. Item number 2, I was reading in a draft recycle report that the Toohey Chub are using about 800 acre feet of water a year. I didn't realize they used that much. I knew they were using some water. Turns out, according to the report, there's a total of 2,500 acre feet total of effluent. So they're using a third of the total effluent that's available, and the Navy only generates 30% of the sewage, and so they're already using more than the Navy is producing. Again, my point is this is a Navy problem, or a federal problem. According to the document, the U.S. Fish and Game or Wildlife Service introduced these things back in the 70s. They were put on another federal property, the BLM, which is now being sort of leased by the Navy. It would be nice if we could figure out how to handle this and not actually use our contractors' time to figure out how we're going to come up with 800 acre feet of water to solve what I feel is a federal problem. Third topic is I believe we've been told for at least a couple months now that we were going to get a brief on brackish water and how that impacts the Groundwater Authority. And we haven't gotten it yet. I'd like to see that happen. I understand that there was some misunderstanding about who is supposed to be giving the brief, and the public doesn't care who gives the brief. It's important to get the information out to the public. Thank you.
Stan, a couple of things. I had asked for it to be on the last agenda. We were as you say, trying to determine how and who is going to do it, it will be on our next agenda.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, and then the other part, Don, when is the last time the Kern County Water Agency was over to measure? Can you address that?
April and October,
Okay,
twice a year.
thank you.
That should be adequate.
Yeah. And they do it every year.
Yes.
And it's consistent, and they report on it, and they give us the measurements and the long list of where they are and the graphs of where they're going.
But we did not get a report out from the April measurements.
It hasn't been published yet.
As far as I know. I don't think I missed any meetings.
Yeah. They report by publishing it to us.
Stan, you've never missed. Am I on? Oh, Stan, you've never missed a meeting, so.
Well, I would hope not.
Well, you don't, but I think it's never like right away. I'm not sure what it takes to tabulate the information, but I think their website tells you that they've done it.
I guess my feeling is the public that's out here in the audience needs to have that information. It needs to be broadcast.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Peggy? I'm sorry, right over here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I would just be curious if Stan could provide the report he's referring to on the 2H hub. Those numbers are definitely out of line with what we're tracking, and it's not a federal problem. It's a federally listed species, and so it's everyone's problem to protect a federally listed species. Oh.
Would you address that to him? Thank you. Thank you, Commander. Okay.
Good morning. How is everybody?
Good.
Great. My
And
name is...
your hair looks good, too.
It looks better than yours.
It does. I just wish It does. I know we look similar.
Way to go, Sam.
We looked similar a few months ago, but you by far overtaken me on awesome hair.
Okay.
Well, all I can suggest is, have some chemo. It does wonders. Anyway, my name is Sophia Merck. I'm speaking for myself and only myself. I've had a few friends that have come up to me from the Kern area. They have bought property in the last 15, 20 years. They bought property with wells on their property, and they have no idea what their well number is, how deep their well is. And they were told to call the Ron Strand. Well, that didn't work for a couple of my friends. So do you have any suggestions for these people that really would like to...
Staff, we have an answer. And Ron, would you address it, because Ron has nothing to do with the drilling of the wells.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, normally what happens is when I receive that information, I get a hold of Stetson, and then they reach out and address that. Every email and message that I've had, I've forwarded to Steve and Heather for their follow-up. So if you have people that have tried reaching out, please let me know, and we'll forward that information on.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And the second thing I want to talk about today is when you have these meetings and then you go into closed session, and I understand everybody wants to get away because a lot of people have to go back out of town. But it would really be nice if you came out and told everybody what the conclusion.
We do that after every closed session when we come
Well,
out.
the one meeting that I did stay around for, I waited and waited, and there was only 3 people that came out, and there was only 2 of us out in the audience, and so therefore the meeting was never properly closed, or was it ever talked about what happened in the closed session. So thank you very much. And I'm not throwing stones.
Gotcha.
I just want the answers. Sure. Thank you.
Hey, Sam, a couple things. To get the depth on the wells, any well driller will come out and tape the well. Some of them use sounders, some use tapes. And so that's how most people get it done. And then the other one is, I think we did step out, and they always have this stock statement, nothing, no action was taken, blah, 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 blah. And so that was the result of that last closed session, just in case you wanted to know.
Sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Derek Hoffman, legal counsel for Meadowbrook Dairy. Just briefly, and kind of on that same general subject about closed session, we know that a lot of issues have been taken up in closed session by the board, and today's board packet reflects a lot of time being spent recently on the subject of pumping allocations. And I'd just like to ask that there be a greater level of transparency in that process on that subject, and hopefully more than we had regarding the development of the fee. That's a request. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Oh.
Renee Westerlusk. I'm commenting as a private citizen, but I'm worried about the language that was adopted at the city council meeting regarding the involvement of the GA with
Renee, I'm
the
going to read
MSA.
that under my comments and have everybody so they understand, okay? But if
Okay.
you want to make your comments, go ahead.
I'm worried that there wasn't enough legal review. I know that Mr. Markman is like the top gun attorney in his field of water law, but I think that there should have been more legal review going to the State Water Resources Control Board attorneys to review that if it really does protect the Groundwater Authority and this valley and the city of Ridgecrest. I also would like more review possibly by the attorneys of the DWR, and if necessary, go to the State Attorney General, and you have contacts in the Department of the Interior and the federal government level. There must be lawyers that could look over that too. I don't think just one expert attorney's opinion on that wording is adequate. Thank you.
Keith, would you address that part?
We did have multiple attorneys look at it. In addition to our offices, we had Jim Markman look at it. My understanding is Kathy Christian, who's our tribal specialist, looked at it as well. I think it was pretty well vetted. I believe that we're now the only basin in the state where an Indian tribe has consented to jurisdiction of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, by the way, so this is a first. When I can tell you that when I talked to Jim Markman about this, the tribe had already approved the language, but Jim looked at it and said, I just want you to know, Keith, there's no way in hell they're going to approve this. And I said, well, they already did, Jim, so take a look at it, please. And he couldn't believe it. So they're waiving sovereign immunity to the GSA on the issue of water. That's a big deal.
Okay. All right. I was going to refer to that under public comments so everyone under council comments so everyone understood what happened. Okay. The next item is presentation on imported water marketing. Who is handling that?
Is this on? I'm on, yes. I'll do that, Madam Chairman. Thank you. For those who were here last month and for those who weren't, I reported last month that one of the things we're working on, we're working through the TAC, one of the items is on alternative water supplies, imported water supplies. We've made 3-4 presentations on the work. Jeff's generally made those presentations. We've made 3-4 presentations on imported water supplies, alternative water, and conservation. All falls under that one category. And at the last board meeting, I reported to the board that there's been a lot of discussion at the board level, certainly, and the staff level, and certainly with the stakeholders, about imported water and the fact that it's a no-brainer. We need imported water in our basin because we're overdrafting and we don't have another source of supply. So what I reported at the last meeting was that we're already starting to work on some of that stuff. It's being done through the TAC and evaluating supplies. But we thought it would be a good idea to bring somebody in who actually works on imported water, works on water marketing at the state level through the State Water Project, actually has connections with ag and ag transfers, water transfers for ag and other purposes. Bring somebody in, let them talk to the board, make a short presentation, and give the opportunity for the board to ask questions about where we may be going on imported water and how we might get there. We have several, through the work that we do, we have many contacts that are involved in the water marketing. Some good, some not so good and whatever. But Todd Tatum is here, and I met Todd maybe 20 years ago. It was easy 20 years ago. And I'll tell you right now, we've never done any work directly with Todd or his group, but we've been aware of what they've done. Whenever we have been looking at water supplies, imported water supplies, or acquiring water supplies through water marketing, water rights on the State Water Project, typically we'll call Todd and ask what's going on and kind of see what's going on. So we use him more as a reference, but we've never worked directly with Todd, so I'm going to give you that qualification. But Todd is very active, and you brought Chris? Jeff, I'm sorry, and brought Jeff with you. I'll let Todd introduce Jeff. I'm not going to go through Todd's resume. He can tell you what he's done before and some of the things that have gone on, but I just thought it would be a really good opportunity to start down that path about where we're going to go. Ultimately, the board may want to hire somebody to do some marketing or maybe work on some kind of a retainer, some kind of arrangement, which we'll figure that out later, but at least get our feet wet on what's out there and what we're going to need to do, where we're going to need to go if we're looking for additional water supplies. We still have to get it here. We still have to have facilities, but it doesn't do any good to have the facilities if you don't have rights to the water, whether it's through a storage agreement or whether it's through a first right of refusal or an actual water right. We still have to get access to the water. So, with that, Todd, we have a podium over here. If you just walk through a little bit, and then we could open up and maybe just have a general discussion about where we might be going, it would be really helpful. And Todd, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Steve. I shared with Steve and Jeff earlier. In fact, my name's Todd Tatum. This is my business partner, Jeff Simonetti. And I shared with the gentleman from Stetson earlier, and I don't know if Steve is aware of this, but my father and I had explored doing imported water for Indian Wells Valley Water District back in the 90s, working with the general manager at the time, Arden Wallum. I'm sure some of you old-timers remember Arden. Well, okay, not that old.
Not so old-timers.
I was really young then, as you can imagine.
Complimentary.
And in fact, we had gotten as far as gone before the LA City Council regarding a turnout off the Brown Road area to get water to your valley. As you know, at the time, Metropolitan Water District, which is typically the biggest barrier to a lot of, especially back in those days, to a lot of water transfers and a lot of water marketing, threw up a lot of barriers to that, as well as LA City Council. We think there's a totally different climate today in the state. And as you'll see in our presentation, I'll let Jeff kick it off. We do believe that there are creative ways to get you all imported water, and we look forward to answering any questions after the presentation.
Well, good morning, everybody. As Todd mentioned, my name is Jeff Simonetti. I'm colleagues with Todd. Done some work together up in both the Central Valley and also down in Southern California here, working on water supplies for both municipal and agricultural clients. And we've been working with Stetson over the last couple of months, giving them some information on sort of an update on where water supplies are, sort of what the water markets are looking like. And Steve and Jeff had mentioned, hey, this is something we've been discussing at Indian Wells Valley, and asked us to give this presentation.
Can I ask, because everybody here is, or is it just me? Maybe get a little bit closer to the microphone.
Sure. Is that better?
Up.
A lot better? Great. Okay.
We all need longer microphones here.
Okay.
How's that?
Thank you.
Everybody hear me?
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So a couple of items that we wanted to cover today. Just wanted to walk through just sort of the general water supply challenges that California is facing and what are sort of the drivers for supply and demand on that. Second, I want to talk to you a bit about what water supplies are looking like, not only on where they're coming from, but sort of give you an idea on historical prices and sort of the trends on that. Talk a little bit about groundwater banking, which has been a significant trend, and particularly in areas that have overdrafted groundwater basins. It's a tool that a lot of people are looking towards. Finally, talking a little bit about what we think would be for water infrastructure for the basin, and then considerations and next steps. So if we look at the challenges that California faces today, I wanted to give you the most recent U.S. Drought Monitor. This is updated weekly. If you go to, I believe it's droughtmonitor.unl.edu. They update this weekly for the United States. This picture looks a lot better than it did 3 to 4 years ago. We only have a little bit of extreme drought in the extreme southeastern portion of California. But if you looked at this map 4 to 5 years ago, the entire state was in some form of drought, and approximately half of the state was in the dark red in D4, which is exceptional drought. So it's gotten better, but we're still facing significant challenges. So what really is driving the water demand? I kind of put it into 3 buckets. First of all, there's population growth and development. Okay, obviously population growth, we have new housing units, new developments coming in. They are required by law to bring in a certain amount of water. Second, certainly there's been a significant amount of agricultural operations across the state. And it's not only more agriculture operations, it's the intensity of the agriculture operations. So over the last few years, there's been a significant focus on things like tree nuts, almonds, pistachios, as well as citrus. Those crops need a water supply all the time. So it's not like row crops, for example, tomatoes or cotton, where if you're in a drought, you just don't plant it for that year. If you have wine grapes on the ground, or if you have pistachios, or you have citrus, you have to water those every year, and it's playing a big role in demand. There's also regulatory concerns. So we've all heard about the Delta smelt. There was discussion earlier about some endangered species. The environmental rules, as well as some of the other environmental regulations around the Delta, are playing a significant role in increasing water demand and constricting supply. So Todd will talk a little bit about the water supply considerations here in California.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. As most of you know, there are really 2 main surface water suppliers within our state. That's the Department of the Interior through the Central Valley Project and different federal projects that they have in the Central Valley, and Department of Water Resources at the state for the State Water Project. Unfortunately, Indian Wells Valley in your area does not sit close to either one of those conveyance systems that bring water north to south. Luckily, though, as I mentioned earlier, you do have at least your basin touches the LADWP aqueduct, so there are ways to get you imported water. As you can see through the Department of Interior, the maximum deliveries that they can give in any year is 9.5 million acre feet and 4.4 million on the state side. But typically, as most of you know, the state delivery fluctuates roughly between 52 and 56% annually of what they can deliver, meaning, if you are entitled to 10,000 acre feet on the State Water Project, you really can only count on 5,000 to, 5,600 acre feet a year, which in a situation with you all where you might consider using or utilizing state water for your imported water, that may require you to buy more water on paper than you actually need.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Could you repeat that 5,000 to 5,600 acre feet available?
Right. That's the long-term average on the State Water Project is roughly 52.
Of available water.
Right. So if your entitlement, as an example, if your entitlement was 10,000 acre feet.
I always feel entitled.
If your entitlement was 10,000 acre feet on the State Water Project, you're typically over the life of the project.
I got it.
Okay.
That's what I remember from before when we talked to you back in the old days.
Correct.
Can I make a comment on that, too? I think it's also true that if you have an allocation of 10,000 acre feet, you pay 10,000 for that allocation. You may only get 5.2 or 5.6, but you pay for 10.
Amen.
And I think recent year allocations have been, I think there was a 0-year allocation in the past, 2 or 3 years.
Correct. For the Central Valley Project, that was in 2014. They had a 0 allocation in 2014 and 2015.
Right.
And in 2014, the State Water Project gave a 5% allocation.
So in essence, a farmer in the Central Valley could be paying for an allocation of 10,000 acre feet, and in 2014, 2015, he got 0.
Correct. Yes.
But he's still paying.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
And on the state side, we haven't had a 100% year since 2006.
So it's unreliable.
Correct.
But just for clarification, at least on the state project side, you pay the fixed costs, but as far as for whatever your allocation is, you pay a variable service charge on what you actually buy. So
Correct.
It's a little more nuanced.
Correct. But you do have those fixed costs annually that come with your amount of entitlement.
One more statement, I guess. That's what stopped. That's one of the things that made it unattractive for the water district is you have to pay all this money for this potential water, and without the guarantee of having the water, and that makes it really dangerous with other people's money. So, any way we can circumvent that or bolster it, I would really like to hear that.
Okay. Jeff, do you want to switch to the next?
Sure.
Okay. So on the along those lines, with the surface water supplies, the two main supplies that I just talked about are basically permanent water rights, where the holders own that entitlement on both the federal and the state systems. So they receive whatever that annual allocation is. They will be stuck with a fixed cost based on their total entitlement, and then they'll pay those variable costs based on what can be delivered. And many of those deliveries occur, especially on the CVP, based on seniority. And those percentage allocations definitely can change from year to year, and they can change drastically. On single-year purchases, which is typically a lease arrangement where you can either lease for 1 year or multiple years, you can, a buyer such as yourselves could purchase physical wet water on that year that you need it. That's also a gamble if you're going to try to go year to year and not tie something up on a long-term lease, depending on, if the water is available. And that's where the groundwater banking can really come into play due to the physical proximity of groundwater banks up and down the state, where the water you might purchase somewhere in the Central Valley or Northern California, if you're not going to take delivery of it here through whichever mechanism, is your ultimate delivery point, you can store that water underground, and typically it's a nominal price that you pay annually to keep that water in storage. But prices for water on the annual quote-unquote spot market differ drastically from year to year. And I think our next slide can show that. Okay, here's what the permanent transactions look like as far as price. We wanted to show you what it typically costs to own a permanent entitlement on either the state or CVP. Back in 2009, Mojave Water Agency, which is where I live in the Mojave Water Agency service area, purchased 14,000 acre feet from Sandridge up in the Central Valley, and that price was $5,250 an acre foot. So for that, they got a permanent entitlement of 14,000 acre feet of SWP, with in mind that, over the long term, only about 7,000 of that is reliable to be delivered. And you can see what the total price was. Yes?
Is it okay if I ask questions as he goes?
Do you mind?
No, that's
okay.
great.
I got one too. Go
I'll
ahead.
try to keep it really short,
Sure.
like me. You said permanent entitlement. This is one-time buy.
Right. This was Table A, state water entitlement. So that entitlement transferred from the farmer was Sandridge, but they were within the Dudley Ridge Water District. That entitlement, Table A, state water, transferred to Mojave.
So their ROI is based on the length of time they can extract water, which would be in perpetuity, averaging 7,000 or thereabouts.
So with that, as Keith pointed out, the 14,000 acre feet, they will pay the fixed cost based on the full entitlement, but then they pay the variable cost based on what's delivered to them.
Okay.
You said permanent. How permanent is permanent?
Well, they now own the 14,000 acre feet of Table A state entitlement.
And it can never be taken away?
No.
The only thing that can change is the amount, whether they get any or the amount.
Right. The state dictates how much they get. I mean, they could theoretically sell that entitlement back to Dudley Ridge or somebody else, but they now own, that's their permanent entitlement. And would typically when, like Jeff and I refer to permanent, it means, a lot of water might be transferred on a long-term lease. There are, 30-plus year lease agreements. So that doesn't give you the quote-unquote pink slip to that water as this permanent transfer does. So it would just be a long-term transfer.
Todd, real quick, aren't the state water project contracts are all coming due in 2035?
Correct.
But everybody who has a table of entitlement will have first opportunity to renew those contracts.
Yes.
Based upon whatever provisions are there, just so everybody knows.
Correct. Also in that same year, Jackson Ranch up in the Central Valley sold 1,748 acre-feet of state water project entitlement to Irvine Ranch Water District. For that purchase price of $14.2 million, they received the 1,748 acre-feet, 880 acres of farmland. That gave them 6% of the Dudley Ridge Water District's capacity in the Kern Water Bank, which allows them to drop water in there when it's available to store. And that also came with 1,000 acre-feet of previously stored water. We put that in just to give you an idea of what that monetary amount, what you get for that amount of money.
And that purchase was based on, again, that year, or is it a perpetuity?
That's perpetuity. No,
perpetuity. Okay.
Yeah, they bought the entitlement. So that 1,748 became theirs. The 880 acres of land became theirs, and their percent in the Dudley Ridge portion of the Kern Water Bank became Irvine Ranches.
Peggy, to help on that, okay, a lot of times the agency has to finance that amount to buy the table of entitlement, so they'll have an annual payment for that. And then whenever they take water, as Todd mentioned, whenever they take water, they'll have an O&M component they'll have to pay for the actual delivery too. So they usually have two pieces in it, a capital cost that they financed, and then an actual cost of the water delivery.
Does that price include both of those components?
No, just the purchase price.
That just lets you buy the permanent water right. Yep. Yes.
Just a quick question: Is it written in the contract that there's no guaranteed minimum? So if we're buying 20,000 and we're only getting 10, 11, I mean, is that a known going in? Legally, that's all that has to be provided, or is this being litigated?
As far as has it been litigated?
Well, I'm assuming it has been litigated, but is it in? I mean, if it's in the contract that this is not a guaranteed amount you're going to get what you get.
See, what typically, because the state water project is made up of those, 29 state contractors, they all consider themselves part of the family of DWR. So they work together on their contracts. So, there's not a lot of outside people coming in buying entitlement who aren't already a state contractor. So those that are within the family know year to year, based on what DWR tells them, how much they're going to get, and that's announced before the water delivery season comes. I'm sure there's, people moan and groan about what's coming or what isn't, but I haven't heard of a lot of specific individual district litigation on the amount of water that the state says they're going to get. Okay.
So for these slides, basically what we were trying to show you here is just give you an idea of what permanent pricing might look like. We also want to give you an idea as well as what single-year water pricing might look like as well. So say, for example, you're a little bit short on your water and you need to, in a given year, purchase physical water. What might that look like? On one end, so for example, in 2016, when we came out of the drought, if you are a CVP contractor and you have the ability to be able to take that water and get it delivered right then, you were able to purchase flood water for approximately $25 to $50 an acre foot from the Bureau of Reclamation. To go in the other extreme, when we're in drought, prices can rise dramatically. Give you a couple of examples here in 2014 and 2015. If you look at the box in the bottom right, the Buena Vista Water Storage District, they are a water district and storage district in Kern County. They had an auction in early 2014 where they had 12,000 acre feet of water available. When they when they got the bids back, they received a total amount requested of 63,100 acre feet. Okay, so they were over 5 times oversubscribed. The minimum acceptable bid per acre foot on that was $600, and the maximum bid that they received was $1,350. Fast forward a year after that, at the height of the drought in 2015, the Madeira Irrigation District sold 3,200 acre feet for $7 million, which is approximately $2,200 an acre foot. So what we're trying to show here is that depending on hydrologic conditions, you can have extreme fluctuations in the prices of single-year purchases. So it helps to get ahead and plan to make sure that you have enough water in the ground for when you need it. So what are some of the ways, you were asking, what are some of the ways that you can maybe mitigate some of those, not only issues of fluctuations in permanent water supply, but also pricing on single years? A lot of the way that farmers, as well as some of the other municipal districts do this, is groundwater banking. And there's groundwater banking is prevalent particularly in Kern County, but throughout the Central Valley. So basically the way that groundwater banking works is in a wet year when there's excess water, the groundwater bank will purchase water. They'll send it in by piping to a recharge basin, which will go into the aquifer. It percolates down into the ground, and when you need to pull it back out, they have extraction wells, which go to your transfer piping, which goes back out to your aqueduct, and you're able to use it. The great thing about groundwater banking is that it gives you the flexibility to be able to purchase water when its times are plentiful and be able to use it when you are in a drought situation. So, for example, in 2016, the Kern Water Bank obviously they had more water than they could use at that point. So they weren't extracting, but they certainly were using the recharge basins to the maximum extent. But during the drought, the Kern Water Bank were coming perilously low to running out of resources in that bank. There are 4 main water banks in the Kern County area, Semi-Tropic being the biggest. They have approximately they have 2 different areas, but their main water bank has approximately 1 million acre feet of capacity. Rosedale Rio Bravo Water Storage District is in central Kern County. Buena Vista Water Storage District was the one that we mentioned. And the Kern Water Bank Authority is primarily agriculture. It's majority owned by Paramount Farms, as well as Metropolitan Water District has some storage in there. So just a couple of things to consider, just moving forward. Should the district want to utilize one of these banks, considering what Todd was mentioning, with the infrastructure requirements and the location of these banks, you would have to consider having some type of partner with another district and execute some type of transfer agreement with them. The good thing about it, too, is, as I mentioned, it provides you flexibility, as to when would the water be purchased and would you be able to have capacity in that bank to deliver water at the point that you need it. There are also cost considerations, obviously, associated with that. Usually the way that these banks work is that it's on a share basis. So you would buy shares in, for example, Semi-Tropic Water District that would give you not only infiltration capacity, but also recharge capacity, pulling the water back out. Then there's O&M costs associated with it as well. And those fluctuate depending on the number of shares that you purchase, as well as electricity charges per year. Yes?
Sorry, I'm just full of questions today.
Sure.
When you say wet water year, is that like synonymous with the spot market, or is that something entirely different?
So spot market could be any year. When I say spot market, that means what is the market this? If you're trying to purchase physical water this year, what would it be?
Okay, so that's right then and there, wherever it is, whatever it is.
Correct. Yes.
Wet water, then what's the difference? And do you buy a right to wet water?
So wet water is it's a funny term. Right?
I actually know what it is. It's excess capacity.
I remember the first time Todd told me that. I had a good laugh.
I remember this whole scenario, and I know what it is. But I was just curious if they were the same. And then, do you secure wet water? Like, do you have an agreement for every wet water year we'll buy blah blah blah?
So it depends. It's basically set up as a lease. So, for example, Metropolitan Water District and a couple of water districts in Southern California during the drought executed a multi-year agreement with some of the north of Delta farming agencies there. So what they'd say is, let's call it a 3-year agreement. I'm going to purchase 1,000 acre-feet from you for the next 3 years. You're going to send that water to me. I'm not purchasing your permanent entitlement. I'm just purchasing that physical water for those 3 years. So I give you the money, water district. You send your physical molecules to me during those years in a given amount.
Okay, so that's it's like if you're going to buy property or something, you have like the first right of refusal or something like that.
Yes.
And the price of that water is established when you create that agreement.
Correct. Yes.
But you only have to pay it if there is water available, the wet water.
So sometimes, yeah. Typically.
Sorry, I just need to know. These are important points because
Sure.
We're spending other people's money.
Sure. In those instances, so if you're talking about a water bank, they know that they have that in the ground.
Right.
For a place like the water districts that I was mentioning that Metropolitan Water District work with, usually the way that they would do it is what's called a fallow transfer. So they have rice farmers that say, you know what, my water this year is going to be more valuable than my rice crop is.
Got it.
So I'm not going to plant my rice crop. I know how much water that rice crop would have used, and I'm taking that block of water that I would have used for my rice crop and selling it.
Okay.
That's usually how those transfers take place.
So in our case, like this last year, they were over capacity, the aqueduct, LA Water Power. Mm-hmm. And so they were releasing water everywhere. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't get it out fast enough. I mean, everywhere.
Sure.
And so obviously that'd be a wet water year.
Yes.
And obviously that would be the opportune time to have a water bank.
Absolutely. And that's 2016 was a perfect example of that. It's the Kern Water Bank, for example, was just running at absolute capacity, and a lot of it's funny to think about, considering how bad the drought was over the last years prior to that, but there was a significant amount of water above and beyond the environmental amounts that just flowed out to the ocean because there was no way to capture that.
So given what we know about that, if we had a water bank, how would it? If you could just give me I don't want to prolong everything, but how would we have implemented the purchase of that water? Would we implement it then, or would it have been better if we had implemented some kind of an agreement before then? Because they, like I said, they just kind of threw it out. I mean, it's going into the environment.
Yeah. So I mean, there's multiple ways to do it. Usually, you never know what the hydrological conditions for any given year are going to be.
I get the variables. Yeah.
Sure, but usually you'll have a pretty good idea. The State Water Project and the Central Valley Project don't give a firm allocation until April, but they start in December to say, here's what we think.
Looking at the predicted weather model.
So considering what they think that'll be, then late December, early January would be the time that you would go up to a water district and say, hey, it's a wet water year. You may have some extra water. Can we start thinking about an agreement that you could finalize over those next couple of months and say finalize in April or May?
Well, I like that because you have a higher level of assurance.
Sure.
So that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. What's next? Okay. So, and we talked about a little bit about groundwater banking, but one of the other things that we're seeing starting as a trend, particularly in areas that have overdrafted groundwater basins, are groundwater markets. And there are two good examples here. One that's been around for a while would be the subbasins in the Mojave Water Agency that has had robust groundwater trading. And recently, as well, the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, which is in Ventura County, have started implementing groundwater markets where when you have finite resources for groundwater, it allows you to basically, between users within the basin, trade groundwater resources either on a permanent basis or on a year-to-year market. I'll let Todd talk a little bit more about that in Mojave.
Yeah, in Mojave, where I live, We actually did a lot of groundwater trading back in the mid to late 90s, and you'll see in the Alto Basin, which is the basin within the sub-basin within Mojave Water Agency, is where the biggest users are. Victorville, Apple Valley, Hesperia, all of those. Mojave Water Agency is the wholesale provider, and all of our purveyors get their water from groundwater pumping. So the purveyors will own Alto Basin water rights. That gives them the amount of water that they can extract annually. Back in the, as you'll see in the late 90s, those Alto Basin rights were roughly $1,000 an acre foot. They got up to $1,500. Today they are typically somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000 an acre foot. And that trend probably, if you put that graph across the State Water Project, it kind of mimics that. And I think what we wanted to show you all here is this is what occurs in water pricing in California. This is a basin that's got a finite amount that's been adjudicated through the courts. Everybody in that basin knows how much they can pump, and that's what occurs with pricing. If you had looked at imported water back in 97, 98, 99, we're probably talking about leased water in the $200 to $300 an acre foot for long-term lease. You could probably buy SWP permanent Table A entitlement around $2,500 an acre foot. So in other words, this is what's coming, and this is going to, we're not going to flatten out. There will never be a flat graph on water pricing in the state of California, just so you all are aware of that whatever you buy today or next year or the year after, in 10 years you'll be able to sit down and look at the graph and tell how much your investment has appreciated.
If you can get it. If you can get it. Yeah.
Okay. So just final slide, what we thought is just sort of considerations for you guys to think about as you move forward here. Obviously through this process you're going to be determining what of the amount of surface water, if any, you would need to implement your sustainability strategy. Then really it comes down to where would that water come from? Who are the partners necessary to purchase and deliver that water, considering the infrastructure requirements that you would have? And what is the infrastructure necessarily to deliver this to the basin? I give you an example. I'm working with a basin water conservation district down in Chino Basin that has percolation basins that they're looking right now to get federal and state funding to help defray some of their costs associated with that. Now, there are no grants or appropriations that would purchase for water, but there is the potential out there that you would have the ability to look at some type of funding sources for helping you build that infrastructure. And then what would those resources necessarily look like? I think kind of putting it into that context will help you make the decisions as to what's the amount, what are our partners going to look like, and where will this water necessarily come from. So we appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you today, and if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
I feel like I'm stealing the show. Bob, are you awake over there? I mean, you
I have some questions. I'm just waiting.
Oh, you're being more polite than me. Usually Bob buries me on questions, and they're usually better than mine. So this is a competition. So like the appurtenance is the way to convey the water.
I'm sorry.
The appurtenance is the pipes and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, or whatever you called it. Those are you think those would qualify for federal funding and stuff? Not the actual purchase of water, but the way to convey the water?
I'm no way guaranteeing that. I'm saying it's a possibility. It's
everything you said is not a guarantee. It's based on a higher probability. I mean,
there's a potential. I'm giving you an example that there are other districts out there doing similar things that are looking for state and federal funding.
Could you do us a favor without charging us more? No, just kidding. Could you give us those names so we could refer to them or something to see how they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Bob?
My question was, I had heard that the state water project contractors are in talks currently to be able to develop a market annually for any water that they're not using. Do you know where that is in the process, how close that is to actually happening to kind of provide additional water might be available on the annual spot market?
Sure. The answer to that question is it depends on the day, and you could ask 13 people and get 17 different answers. There's a lot of factions. So there's 29 state water contractors, and there's obviously different factions within there. The big lift that they're going to have is that they have a contract in place, basically an MOU. And to be able to implement the strategy that you're talking about, there's certainly some political will there, but it requires contract amendments to be able to get that through. So putting my crystal ball here for a second, do I think eventually that would happen? Probably, but I think it's going to require some time and the political will to be able to do that. And getting the stars to align, I think it's going to take a while on that process.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, you gave us a lot of good basic information about water banks and how they work in terms of, we would, if we wanted to utilize one of them, we'd probably have to buy shares to basically buy capacity in that, and then do a deal with another agency that would provide, get us the water. But in the banks that you mentioned as being in Kern County or just generally, what's the range of loss that you have to factor in? I mean, we put in 1,000 acre-feet of water in a wet year, but when we want to pull it out 3 years later, the water bank, do they typically require us to assume that we've lost a certain percentage of water over that time before, and so we really can't pull out 1,000 acre-feet? Yes,
typically it's 10%. It's what the loss is.
Other questions?
I just had a follow-up to
Commander?
Bob's. So we talked about with the water project, 10,000, you can expect 5,000. What are the protections in place on a bank? If I put 10,000 in the ground, I subtract out my 10% loss, am I guaranteed to get 9,000 back, or should I expect more along the lines of 4 and 5?
That's a good question. So in the instances so far that we've seen, because these water banks have been pretty well studied in terms of when you put the water in the ground, it stays there. And I mean, the banks are located in areas where they know the hydrology and they know it's predictable. So barring the 10% loss, I don't know of an instance where there's been anybody getting hornswoggled on that. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I've commented earlier that Kern County is working a deal with Willow Springs Water Bank. Mm-hmm. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that they're expanding their bank from 500,000 acre-feet to 1 million? Can you talk about that project from your perspective and what you're seeing? Well, let me set the stage for you. We've signed as a partner in that because the hazard mitigation plan that we have, Kern County has, that enable them granting to expand their water bank. Yep. And in exchange, they've given us capacity in this agreement for 30,000 acre-feet.
Yes.
Could you comment and tell me what you guys think about that?
So I am not familiar with your agreement with them. I know that they have recently gotten. We're in the finalists for the Prop 1 funding associated with being able to build that bank out. What I believe they still need to do is build out some more of their infrastructure to be able to get the tie-ins associated with being able to increase that capacity. And I think that's what everything is with the Prop 1 money is going towards. Anything to add on that?
No. Have you been out there to the Willow Springs Water Bank? And well, the proximity, that is an example of a water bank that could work for this basin. They are almost immediately on the LA DWP aqueduct. Right. They get their wet water put in there through AVAC, Antelope Valley East Kern Water District. So there's a pipeline that comes out there. And as you said, they currently can hold 500,000 acre-feet, and they're expanding it to a much bigger water bank. They were originally affiliated with Semi-Tropic,
Right.
and now they're sort of on their own as Willow Springs.
They bailed out. So I guess where I'm going, we feel pretty optimistic about this opportunity. Do you agree with that? There's a reason for optimism on their success of qualifying for this grant to expand their water banking capability?
I believe so. That
Yeah,
they're going to get the grant.
Yeah, I
When
think
is that
they're. I think
decision
they're
gonna be
going to.
made?
So that's a good question. There was the final determination. So, for example, Sites Reservoir, Temperance Flat, they got their I believe they got their final numbers, and I think it's in the next couple of months where they'll get the final allocation. One thing that I would mention about Willow Springs, I think they have the theoretical potential. Obviously they have the capacity there. I think the constraining factor that they have, and it's something that, and again, I'm not 100% familiar with all that's going into the Prop 1 project, but I think one thing that they need to address over the longer term is the transferability between aqueduct to them to end users, and I believe that's part of the reason why they're going for this grant funding. To be able to expand their ability to have connectivity between.
There's another potential hurdle, too, putting aside the physical conveyance issue. It is also subject to the Antelope Valley Water Master entity that was formed in the judgment, and that has some, we can talk about it offline, but it's got some additional restrictions on exporting water out of the basin.
Right. The conveyance would be just wheeling it finding some way to wheel it off the aqueduct up here. I mean, we wouldn't have to physically bring the water up from Antelope Valley, correct?
No, but what I'm saying is, if I'm not mistaken, I think they use AVEX pipeline right now to be able to bring the water to the Willow Springs Water District. Right. So let's say I'm saying right now, let's say it's a super wet water year, and AVEC wants to use their own program, fill up their own water bank. I think AVEC has first priority before them, and that's what I'm saying. That those type of infrastructure things, I think, are the things that need to be addressed, okay. And I believe are the things that are getting addressed through that Prop 1 grant.
Thank you.
Steve?
Just for a second, I just want to double back on Bob's first question because he was asking about surplus water and what's being done with the. And I agree with your answer, Jeff. That you ask the contractor, you get lots of different answers on what's being done on this stuff.
Yep.
But for the audience, because a lot of this is new, I wanted to make sure the audience was aware that these state water contractors, they're a pretty tight bunch. They spend a lot of money. They're heavily invested in this, and they obviously try to protect their water supplies.
Yep.
Back in was the Monterey Agreement when they did the met in Monterey, all the contractors met and tried to revise some of the contractual arrangements. One of the things they did do in the Monterey Agreement is create the turnback pool. But the limitations on the turnback pool means that if we have a state water contractors don't use their allocation for a particular year, they can turn it back into a pool, and they get not a lot of money for it. Last time I looked, it was $10 or $15.
Yeah, I think it's up to 20 or 25.
Yeah,
now.
It's not a lot of money. It goes back into the pool, but it goes back into the pool for the other state water contractors to then purchase or then get access to. So there are arrangements made internally to take care of those surplus conditions, and we're looking for stuff outside of that type of arrangement. Mm-hmm. Just for the audience, so you guys know.
I have two questions.
Yes.
One, what is the time frame in let's assume we decide tomorrow we're going to make a bid, whatever you call it, on water. What is the time frame of that process?
You want to handle that one?
That's another one of those,
Okay.
it could vary.
All right.
We currently have relationships with a number of districts in the Central Valley where if somebody called us today and said we need 5,000 acre-feet of water, we could probably have a good sense of where that water could come from, by the beginning of the week. It does take time, though, to work through the process, to get it contracted, to, find out what environmental work needs to be done. Another thing that you all need to be in consideration with when you start looking at imported water is just my recommendation. The first step would be to go to the city of Los Angeles and make sure infrastructure-wise you can do what you physically need to do to get water into your basin and work through that process first. That doesn't mean constructing any of that. I would just make sure that you've got all those agreements in place before you spend any money on actual water. And you could do that on parallel tracks, but I think you'll know in the beginning, how willing the city of Los Angeles will be to let water out of their aqueduct.
Is there any advantage in being a small water user? We're not going to need 100,000 acre feet, but is there some advantage where we could find a niche in there for a smaller user?
I think so. Jeff and I talked about this on the ride up, and there might be a combination of partners for you all. We're not sure what your final number would be annually, but that could come from 2, 3, 4 districts, or you could partner with one large district. But yeah, you're not going to be at like the level of Mojave with 80,000 acre feet of entitlement that they have, or any of the bigger districts.
Okay.
Just one thing that I wanted to add. You were talking about timing. One of the bottlenecks and mitigating factors for moving things quickly are twofold. Number one, environmental items. So usually water transfers are subject to at least a mitigated negative declaration, sometimes an EIR. I'm not an attorney, so I'll leave that to the attorneys to make that determination. Second thing is that the Department of Water Resources has to sign off on transfers as well. So, and they move at their own pace at some points. So,
okay.
Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Bob.
I had one more question. You provided examples of a lot of different potential price points to kind of give us a flavor of what that was. And the last one you showed was the prices in the Alta sub-area of the Mojave area basin adjudication. My question is that, how indicative would this example be to what we would experience? Because my understanding of the Mojave area adjudication is that you can't transfer water between sub-areas. So this is a closed market that you've got some major populous areas in the Victor Valley that are having to compete for whoever's got water rights to sell that year. So we're looking at trying to find basins or areas that are willing to export to us. So how does that potentially impact what the price we might see compared to this closed market?
So I just gave this as an example to you. If this as a possibility that something you might want to consider implementing within your own basin. That was the only reason why I gave that. But in terms of you're right that your export markets are going to look different. And even within the Mojave Water Agency, there are 4 or 5. There's 5 sub areas, and their areas do different. We gave you the Alto Basin because that obviously covers the most populated areas. But if you look at particularly the Baja Basin, which covers Newberry Springs, Daggett, that area, Yermo, east of Barstow, they've had a significant uptick in prices as well because there's been more agricultural pressures out there.
Well, and also they're also under a ramp down. They're down to 35% of what
absolutely.
They were at the time of the adjudication. That's still not enough to make that a sustainable managed basin sub-area.
Yes.
And I think this graph too also was to show you all how water appreciates, over the long term. That if you're paying $5,000 an acre foot for whatever permanent entitlement you might buy, if we were to all come back here in 20 to 30 years, you're going to see the same sort of steady graph. Water's never going to go down in this state back to the levels that we saw in the 90s. It will not happen. So.
Okay, any other questions? Brian, did I see you wanting one? Yes.
If this goes long, I apologize. So I'm kind of in my mind sitting here and thinking much bigger picture as far as, we're looking for a bank. We're looking for importing water. What is the probability, in your opinion, of us becoming a bank and solving our water problem off of the loss. Other folks come here, store the water. We give them back 90% of it. Some of that 10% solves our water problem. What does something like that entail to where we solve our issue by becoming our own bank?
So I'm going to punt that to your engineer. The answer to that question is obviously there's if it's theoretically possible, there are obviously costs associated with building a bank. The biggest factor in building a bank is, do you have a underground hydrology that would support that?
But before he punts to Steve, there are 4 letters too, that LADWP, 5 letters. That's the only way you can get water into your basin is by utilizing their infrastructure.
Without building something new. Yeah.
Right. And something new, God knows what that would cost. Right.
Yeah. In answer to your question, Commander, one of our options is to talk to LADWP about a banking arrangement. And LADWP has put feelers out for banking arrangements for surplus water because, as was described just a few years ago, they had a lot of water that was going everywhere. They needed places to put it. They ended up banking some water down in the LA area. But we do have a challenge in our hydrogeology. We do not have the best hydrogeology. We don't have, an unconfined aquifer of sand and gravel that you see in other areas that make it a desirable site for banking. You want to get the water in, and you want to get it out, and you want it to stay around.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Gee, too bad we didn't listen when Mitch Kadama was up here trying to do that 20 years ago.
Yep. I just had one more thing, Mayor, just one more quick question, and this is not a planned question. I just wanted to throw it out there. For you guys, Todd and Jeff, can you explain kind of just real briefly to the board how you work, what kind of an arrangement you would foresee, or optional arrangements you would work should the organization want to look for help in finding water?
Yeah, typically what we've done in the past is it's been a combination arrangement where, in the beginning we've subcontracted under, a Stetson or Somas or, the other big engineering firms where we go out to firm up the supply. We've also been under the arrangement where it's just a straight commission based on the water purchase. But typically it's in conjunction with your engineer, working together with them. Time frame, I don't know how long it would be to find that, like I said, it could be a number of phone calls for us to find available water. But by the time we're to the point where you're bringing in whatever your attorney is to help develop the contracts for that could be, 8 months, 9 months to a year.
Okay, Bob, did you want to speak? No? Okay, is everybody else?
I got one more thing.
Go ahead.
So the reason I'm talking, because I am water, I guess, but it was feasible. We had a feasible project that the water district did, and we invested a lot of resources, time, and et cetera. So there's a possibility, there's a high probability that we could create our own water bank, and that was our end game. But again, the drought happens, and then stuff happens, and that's what happens. So the good news is we've done a lot of groundwork, and all that information's public, available, whatever. I think the only thing we didn't do was the hydraulic model to validate whether the water would stay where it's supposed to or not, and that's like the final thing.
Sure.
And it's kind of expensive to do that particular thing too.
Sure. And I think the important thing to, if that's a route that you were thinking of going down.
No, we were.
Or continuing to think of going down, make sure to do the cost-benefit analysis of the time and the cost that it would to build your own versus buying shares in another water district.
Well, of course, that's always the driver, but the thing is, if you could find money to do the infrastructure, the capital, that you don't have to pay back, via whatever, then it would be optimal to have our own water bank.
Sure.
Right?
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Todd and Jeff. Thank you, guys.
All right, so we are on the consent calendar. Do we have that up where they can see it? Okay, approve minutes of the board meeting. Approve expenditures, they are listed there. Do you want to, we're going to talk about the financial report? Are we going to pull that off the consent agenda, or are we giving a financial report?
It's on the consent
Staff?
agenda.
Are we are? Okay.
I believe the financial report is just discussing the pumping fee status and schedule that's included
I
in
can't
the
hear you,
agenda.
Ron.
It's the pumping fee status schedule that's included in the agenda packet. It just lists the dates that the registration forms are due and when the forms are due back and stuff. It's just
all right. And then there was a nomination to approve a new member to PAC, and that is replacing on the business from the Board of Realtors. That would be James Mauer. And those items are on the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull anything, or are we going the way we are? Okay, motion?
I'll make a motion on the consent to approve the consent agenda with a thank you to Carol Wilson for participating as a member of the PAC previously. I sincerely appreciate that and look forward to James's participation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the next item on the agenda is number 5, and that is the Water Resources Manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We're going to start with the poem, so Jeff's going to present that. I want to welcome the commander back. We're going to do the poem, so we'll have transition with the. No, we didn't skip it, but it was very calm.
It was a limerick.
So Jeff's going to present that. I'll let you know that there should be copies of each of the items, A, B, C, and D. D, we don't have an overhead, so if you're interested in D, you should probably grab a handout. I'll do B, C, and D, and Jeff's going to do the poem. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. We've got the poem up, and this is the summary page. And I just wanted to point out, there's a couple of things that are either ending or about to end, and one that's beginning. And those are lines 83, 89, and 96, which are kind of in the middle of this summary page. And that is the imported water study that we've been doing. We're not done yet, but we're getting close to the end of that. I think the schedule calls for it to be done in December. I think we'll actually get it done in advance of that, unless new issues or opportunities come up. We should have it done before the end of December. The item that's due to close is our study on the recycled water, potential recycled water projects, and a draft of our memo was sent out to the TAC, and we've received comments and are looking at those and revising the report, and then that will be redistributed and posted when it's revised. So that phase of the project is actually wrapping up now and will be completed here in the next few weeks. And the thing that's just now beginning is we're actually starting to write the text for the groundwater sustainability plan itself, and we're starting with the introductory chapter, which has some of the basics in it, but that'll be the kickoff to actually writing the plan itself. So that's starting now, and that'll be out in the next, a draft of the introductory chapter will be out in the next 4 to 6 weeks. If I can go to I can do that. I'm just going to go to the kind of the critical items here, which are, of course, shown in red, and that has to do with modeling. The top line is, right, we reviewed the model that had already been prepared by DRI for the Navy and made some suggested changes to that so that it would be suitable for use for working on the groundwater sustainability plan. And that work's underway now, and they're doing what we're calling the historical calibration. They've made the changes that are making the changes that were recommended, and they're then going to recalibrate the model so that it matches historically water levels in the basin. So that's a critical step that's underway right now, and there's the top red line there. Underneath that top red line, there's a little diamond shape there. That was an ad hoc committee of some of the members of the TAC to meet with the modelers and talk about the historical recharge and pumping that should be used in the model. That was a very productive meeting and a good opportunity to kind of get into the details and the technical information and give some feedback to the modelers who are following up on the things that were discussed with the ad hoc committee. And they will have the calibration completed by November. But before that, there's actually going to be a calibration workshop with the ad hoc committee to talk in more detail about how that process is going. And then we'll be ready to start looking at what scenarios we want to model going forward, and that is what management actions do we want to run through the model. Do we want to run, X acre feet of imported water coming in, or all of the recycled water potential we've identified, or whatever other management actions will be developed by then to see how they affect our water levels and the other potential undesirable results that the groundwater sustainability plan we'll look at. So those are the critical things that are either underway or about to start, which are all those red lines there that I just wanted to point out. We're kind of in the meat of the technical part of the modeling now. And going to, and these critical path items there in the middle are the things I'd mentioned from the summary page. That's the imported water study, and as you can see, we're getting to the end of those critical path items. And as I mentioned, we'll probably be done with the overall imported water study early, so that'll help us a little bit. That's really all I wanted to point out briefly on the schedule today. Any questions?
Oh, he's looking at, you're the guy that's asked.
I was looking at you. It's your last opportunity.
No, one more meeting.
Oh, you do good,
yeah.
Good.
I guess a good opportunity. I'd just like to introduce Commander Pete Benson. He's going to be taking over as the Public Works Officer and the Navy representative on this board. So I've got this one, next one. And,
that's a celebration.
They're all glad to see me go.
We're going to have a special party just for you.
We're going to have a big party.
I do have a question. Can I ask a question?
Please.
Sorry, I'm not actually doing this right. Peggy's supposed to give me permission, so I have permission. Right. Anyways, so you got $1 million in here for a data gap, yada yada. What is really necessary? And this is like a fundamental question to complete a plan. So I get monitoring, cause and effect is a big deal, but can't this all be done after the plan has been created? And then as you discover information, it could be changed to be more focused on where we really need to do it. In other words, you kind of want to get information on cause and effect of, let's say, pumping. Let's say you're next to one of our primary well fields, the water district. And so we have monitoring wells already, and we've already drilled some new ones. So we actually we did a 30-day pump test in one of our areas, which was enormously beneficial at incredibly high rates. But to do the plan, do we really need this? Because this is something that's going to take place over a long period of time to look at cause and effect. Because we make these assumptions based on the most probable outcome, and that's what you brainy guys are for. But you're not going to actually get that data for quite some time. It'll have to be a bunch of things over time that says we have a much better picture of what it's doing now because our monitoring wells are telling us that. Our plan has to be in place by 2020, and we're not going to get any wells drilled, if any, until after that probably. So is this necessary? In other words, can this be put on like a process of implementing the plan after the plan has been in place, instead of like doing everything with the kitchen sink and the steaks and the barbecue and like right now? Can't we just have like a plan that says this is what we will do, and then that plan's in place, and then everybody knows what to expect. And then we start implementing these capital type projects, whether it be water banking or brackish water treatment or monitoring wells. Is this necessary and absolute now? And can it be put on later?
There's a number of parts to the answer to that. One, there is quite a bit of good data available, and a lot of studies been done on this basin, and we're utilizing all of that. Of course, whenever you do this, you want to make sure you have as much information as you can have. One of the key considerations is that $1 million for monitoring wells. When we put the grant application together, we were required to have matching funds. A big portion of that $1 million is the well drilling services from the Navy, which they were going to do anyway. So we were able to count that as in-kind services, cash we don't have to come up with, to be able to maximize the amount of the grant we want. So that was a critical item in meeting the obligation for the matching funds that the state required at that time. And your point about, this is an ongoing process and we're going to get feedback on how the plan works, that's definitely true. We're going to use the data we have. We're going to drill some wells, and we won't get a lot of water level data out of this current well drilling activity. We will get some lithological information on the soils and the geology. May not be critical to what we do, but it is additional information that we will gather. But then going forward, one of the parts of that step is, where do we still have data gaps? After we do everything that's in the plan, where are there still data gaps? Where are the critical places we need to monitor? And as we go forward, and part of this plan, we can say, going forward, here's the additional data we need. So there can and will be recommendations for, here's things to do on gathering data, potentially wells, going forward in the future. And that will change as we implement the plan. Every 5 years, we have to update the plan. We'll look and see, are things responded the way we thought? Do we now think we need data in a different area because something's occurring there that we hadn't anticipated? So all those things came into play.
Okay, so I understand that. That's like the big number that helped you balance out the grant, and I knew that. Is there a way that we could ask them? There's what was our percentage of matching? Was it like 1-to-1 or
50%? Yeah, it was 1-to-1.
That's kind of what I thought. I heard there was ways to renegotiate that, and to make it like, we'll give you 25% to 1 or something like that.
Well, they've actually waived. We found out after they announced the award of the contract, they waived our matching requirement. However, they were already granted the grant, and the award was based on the work plan we put forward.
I understand.
We've still got to produce the products that were in it.
I understand, but because they did that, they waived it entirely?
Right.
Yes.
Well, how cool is that?
Yeah.
I think you said that, but I didn't really
reported
understand.
In the last meeting, yes. They waived the 50% match.
Yeah, that's awesome. Knowing that, and that after the fact they waived it, wouldn't it be logical to assume that after the fact we could say, we have an even better plan to use your money? I know you're dying over there. So I know he's dying because I'm talking. But I'm just saying, if I know that your logic was right, and the data gaps, filling those is good, and we all want more data. This is the town that wants more data. I've grown up here. Everybody wants more data, and it's good. But could you reprogram that money for something even better? And I don't know what that would be. I don't have any idea. It's just a thought. If logically they said after the fact, hey, forget about that match. Well, cool. Now what do we want to do? Or now what can we do? And I really do appreciate your services in kind. Thank you very much. I know we kind of chastise you because it's fun, but you are integral to our plan.
I just heard I don't have to do in-kind services because that part's been waived.
Oh, well. I didn't hear that. Yep. Did you hear that? I didn't hear that. The point is that, and I'll stop talking, Peggy. I just was curious because I'm a businessman, and my modicum is, you can always ask, what will it hurt? Even if it's the IRS. So,
if I might, Jeff, just to follow up, Director, as soon as we heard it was waived, Director Brown, as soon as we found out it was waived, my first question internally to our staff was understanding first exactly what it meant. And I think I reported at the last meeting that it was waived. The conclusion, understanding what it really meant, is a whole lot less paperwork for us in the state. So we're not, when we submit invoices and we submit progress reports and that kind of thing, we're not going to have to demonstrate the match in order to get the money in. All it has to do is match the scope and work of budget. So that was the end conclusion. But in the interim, when we looked at it, the first question I asked was, wow, there were a lot of things we put into that scope and budget in order to maximize the $1.5 million we're getting from the state. Is it appropriate for us to ask maybe we don't have to do those anymore? And the answer we've gotten, and at least preliminary from the state, is you have a scope and schedule that you have to adhere to because that's what's been approved. Doesn't mean that we're not going forward, be looking at those things. I think it's premature for us to do it right now because we don't even have an agreement yet. I really don't want to make the state mad at us. I'm going to give a report on the status of that Prop 1 agreement pretty quick. But your questions are exactly the same questions that we raised internally when we heard it was waived was, okay, what do we really need to do right now? What maybe don't we need to do? And what can we get the state to agree to? I have a suspicion that the way the state processed these grants, loans and this grant money, and the way they processed it of the 50% match, and the way they processed waiving, purposely created a scope and a schedule and a budget for work, and then waived the match after it was all approved, so that they could get what they wanted and something they approved in the scope of budget. But we are going to look at it for sure.
Okay, so that satisfies my question, and as long as we do that, and you report to us what that is, because optimizing the dollars that we spend, in my case, ratepayer money, in the county's case, general fund money, the city, et cetera, any way we can make those dollars optimal, getting us even better, a better product, whatever that may be, is where we're headed, or is where I always want to go. And so I appreciate you thinking ahead for me and acting in that way. So you've answered my question. Thank you.
I had one last thing, and this is just for information. I think it's important for the audience to know this, and some of the stakeholders, I'm not going to directly, I don't want to bring up something that creates controversy, but it's in relation to finance committee type stuff. There's been a lot of interest in finance committee, and should we have one, should we not? I wanted to let the audience know and the board know that we think about that kind of stuff too. And one of the things that I did was go back and I actually started on a separate path and then went back and looked at the poem because I remember Commander Longbottom said, look at the poem, it's all in the poem. So I went back to look at the poem, and actually we actually in the poem, and I'm going to provide this to Director Page and to Alan Christensen as soon as I'm done with it. But in the poem, we provide our task. We have task numbers for everything that is being done, that we are doing. Everything is in there, along with budgets and expenditures and all that. All that information is in there, what we spent to date, and it's all there right now. I'm working on a table that I'm going to provide, as I mentioned, to Director Page and Alan Christensen as part of the finance group that we go to the board. Similar to what's there, first thing I want to do is make sure they match exactly, but we're going to provide something that shows these tasks, all the work tasks, the budgets, and everything in there. And I'm going to show so that everybody can see about probably 85 to 90, probably 85% of all of those tasks are directly out of the Prop 1 grant scope and budget, probably 85%. There's probably 3 or 4 items on those work tasks that are partially being reimbursed by the Prop 1 grant, but partially not being reimbursed because when we applied for the grant, we applied for a certain amount for reimbursement. Things like, and I'll give you an example, the amount of meetings we have and preparing for meetings and things like that. Some of that we're getting reimbursed from the Prop 1, but not 100%. So some items that we're working on are partially part of the grant and partially being funded by the authority through the pump fee and other sources. Then there's some other items, which I'm going to show when I provide this table, that are 100% not part of the grant, that are 100% paid for by the authority and the funds that come to the authority. These are things like the application for the Prop 1 funds. Okay? We don't get reimbursed from the application. Some administrative costs we do. That's kind of an in-betweener. But the application, we're talking about and we've already started, we already applied once, an application for the TSS grant funding, the technical services funding. Things like that are not being reimbursed at all by Prop 1 grant. They're all being paid out of the funds. So I'm going to show that probably 85% of everything that we're doing is in the Prop 1 grant schedule, work schedule, budget, and scope of work. And then where we have partials, I'm going to show the partials, and where it's 100% out, show it. So you can actually see exactly where work's being done and how it's being paid for. So I hope that's going to help. And then Finance Committee, whatever you guys decide to do in the Finance Committee, but I think that'll certainly help alleviate some of the thoughts about what we're actually doing, and where we're going. So that was it. Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion on that particular topic?
Well, the topic is
I know, we're going back
Yeah,
to
the
that, but is that the end? Okay. Go ahead, sir. Steve, are you?
Oh, for next time. I think that's the end of the poem. Yeah, next item. Thank you. Next item is the report on the Prop 1 grant application status. I think we've got an overhead for that. In case we don't, I better grab mine. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is really just an update. We originally submitted the exhibits to the grant, to the Prop 1 grant, revised exhibits based upon comments we received from DWR staff back on the end of July. We received comments back. We revised those exhibits and resubmitted them to DWR on the 10th of August. I believe we had, because we just sent out a notice a couple days ago, I believe we got some additional comments back from staff and then resubmitted those, I believe on the 14th, yesterday, 65th, on Tuesday, resubmitted those, and DWR has accepted all the exhibits. So at this point in time, DWR, their deadline was the 15th. At this point in time, DWR has all of the information they need ahead of their deadline, which was the 15th, to process the grant agreement. They've indicated to us their goal is to have the agreement signed and executed by the end of September. I reported at the last meeting, so that hasn't changed. I've also reported that our goal is to try and keep the ball in the state's court, so we're waiting for DWR. They're not waiting for us. We have it in their court. We're waiting on them right now. As soon as we get an agreement with the exhibits ready to sign, we'll sign it. Ron's already authorized to sign it, so we should be ready to go. The goal here is to get this thing approved, executed as soon as possible, because as soon as we do, we can start processing a progress report and an invoice to the state and start getting some reimbursement. Yes. So that's the report there. Let me just make sure I don't have anything else on that item. But I want to cover it, then I'll go back.
Bob, do you want to ask your question while we're letting Steve look to where it's going?
And this is the prior Prop 1 grant. I had a question. In looking at the finance report that we approved, I'm not seeing that we've gotten any more money recently reimbursed by the state under the Distressed Counties grant. In looking at the revenue here, it's still holding at the two. We've only had two, I think, reimbursements at this point. Do we know how far off the next reimbursement is?
I don't know, because that's being done through the county,
through Kern County,
with Alan.
Ron, has Alan shared anything in terms of the status of additional money from that, from the Distressed County grant, the first Prop 1 grant that Kern County got for this JPA?
He has not advised me of such, but I can reach out to him and get that information.
Okay.
Alan's been on vacation. He just got back. I don't know if he got back yet or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's back. Him and I have been exchanging emails the last couple of days.
So, go to the next item?
Please.
We go to the next item. We can put the next item up. The next item already is? No, next item is on the pump fee status and schedule. I just want to give a report of what's happened and kind of where we are and where we're going. On the pump fee status and schedule, as you all know, the pump fee was adopted at the last meeting. Registration forms were sent out on the 26th to 68 well system owners considered to be non-de minimis. Those went out. Registration forms are due back on the 20th. We're already receiving some. We've got around 9 or 10 have already come back in. So we're looking at those. We've also got some come back that didn't make it to the sender. So we're working that out with, I think Lauren's helping us and the city's helping us kind of track those down. We will be sending out reporting forms The goal is by the 24th, although we're starting to pull those together. As I reported before, we're taking the registration forms. I think you've all seen the draft well report form in its draft form. We're going to customize every report form to match the registration forms that we get in. That's the work that we need to do to get them processed and get them turned around and get them back out. First month of reporting on the pump fee is the month of September, so first reading is September 1st. Going to the next month, the October pumping report forms will be mailed by about the 24th of September, so that's going for the next month. We'll continue that process. Payments, the reports we're doing back along with the first payments are due to the Water District by the 10th of October for the September pumping. And the last thing I want to report is that since we've kind of gotten in front of this a little bit now, we kind of got things going, we did set up some internal staff meetings. This was with general managers, our office, and certainly the people that do all the work, like Lauren and Ricka and those people that are doing all the work. We've set up some internal staff calls on 2 items. One of them is administration of the pump fee and how we're going to administrate all this, how we're going to bring the forms in, we're going to check the forms, verify the forms, how whatever payments come in, where they're going to go and how they're managed. So we're working on that. We've had 2 conference calls. I think we're tracking pretty good there. And how we're going to keep our files, and we're going to keep duplicate files. We even talked about making things available online so people can go online and see this kind of stuff. The second thing we had a conference call on, we had the 2 conference calls on both subjects. The second one is looking forward. We're not doing anything big on it right now, although as part of the non-de minimis, we need to do some work fairly soon to determine how complete our records are on the non-de minimis well owners. But we've had a call coordinating our staffs on how we plan to go forward on identification of all wells and all well owners throughout the basin. That includes de minimis and non-de minimis. Now, everybody knows, and this is there's no requirement to register de minimis wells right now. But as we start to put our methods together, we want to get the tools together, the documentation together, effectively showing due diligence by the authority to go out there and try to identify the well owners in the basin. So I mentioned before, even de minimis pumpers, we're welcome to get information. There's no requirement to provide information of what you have. There's no pump fee for de minimis pumpers right now, but certainly that information will help us. But we're basically just trying to set the procedures up so we can show the due diligence and documentation of how we're going to go about attempting to identify all of the well owners within the basin. So that's my report on the pump fee status and schedule.
Bob?
Yeah, I had another comment regarding how this relates to the finance report. The cash flow projection part of the finance report does not have a line item yet for revenue from the well extraction fee. So I'm wondering, is that going to happen by the next meeting, that we're going to start seeing a line item with some projections of revenue, or are we going to wait till money actually starts coming in to get a better feel for how much money we should expect?
I don't have an answer for you on that yet. I know that we're looking at establishing a bank account, and how when the money starts coming in, how that cash flow is going to work its way back to through the county or through the water district into the GA's own account. So I'm sure that we'll have that fleshed out here by the next month.
I could even help a little bit on that, Bob. Our office is working with Alan and Carmina, his assistant, and certainly Lauren too, on cash flow projections. We're working on it. They have it, but we're working on it at the same time, because obviously it's a concern of ours too, but we are working on that, and I'm sure Alan will bring something back. The last thing I wanted to say, which I didn't mention, I got to read my notes again.
We got a couple more questions here. Go, Mick.
Okay, quick question, comment. As we expand registration and the administration of wells, de minimis and non-de minimis, I'd like to get together with you well in advance before we begin that process. And I'd like to think if we can bring some of the public into that process, we have a simple, easy, the most non-intrusive possible way of making those decisions and collecting that data is critical to our success, and broadcasting to the world that they know what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing, and understanding the limited nature of what we're doing. I think that's going to be critical to our success. So before we begin that let's get together.
Yep, you bet.
Please, and I'll get together with some other folks.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep, the wounds have not healed yet.
Okay, Peter?
Oh, thank you.
You said you wanted to speak.
I do, but
Okay.
it's just like a functional thing. How are people going to pay? Like, are they just going to have we established like a time to pay and how to pay, a way to receive payment, voucher, receipt, online, yada yada. I mean, it's like so, like a co-op, they say, oh, we've used this much water. And let's say, if it's $30 an acre foot and they've used a quarter of an acre or something, I don't know. Do they just automatically send in a check to the water district address GSA, or do we have some like formal way? Because usually when I pay somebody, I want a receipt. And have we adopted like a unit, like I don't know, a turnkey, whatever you want to call it, a way of receiving payment, billing, etc.?
Those are the administrative processes we're working through right now.
Okay.
But the answer to your question, generally, the description you provided whereby they submit a check with their well report form is the way it would be done. I don't think we haven't talked about returning a receipt, but we are looking at putting it online, so you will be able to see online that payments were made and check it that way. But that is the administrative process we're working on right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
I
Okay,
just
Steve,
wanted-
you have one more item?
I just wanted, one more, but I wanted to finish up on that because I didn't tell you this is kind of important, is that with those calls we're doing, both for the pump fee status and how the administration, how it's going, and on well identification, we will be producing sort of an internal memo, just a guidance memo on what we decided to do, how we decided to do it, and it'll be just, once a team looks at it, we sent to the board and available to the public. So as we're developing these things, we're going to get it out to you, so you'll see it.
Okay, and then your next item, because I'm going to ask for public comment.
Sure. The last item is, we received several comments over the last few months, and actually, once again, we kind of talked about this internally several months ago, was we ought to start looking at organization of what the GSP is going to look like. And we got comments at a TAC meeting 2 meetings ago that were exactly the same thing. Boy, it'd be nice to see what you guys are looking at, where you think you're going. We basically took the outline provided by DWR for GSPs that was provided online. We actually took that, we modified it to match what it is we foresee addressing as part of this GSP for Ridgecrest, for this area, for Indian Wells. We prepared a draft outline of the GSP. We distributed it to both the PAC and the TAC. We received comments back on both. I don't see Don or Judy Decker here. We got separate comments from Don that were also very good. We haven't revised it yet, but a copy of the draft GSP is here. We weren't going to put it. It's about 6 pages. There's a reason why we didn't want to put it up, but there should be copies available if anybody wants to see it. But I want to let people know that we are looking forward toward completion of the GSP and creating a fairly detailed outline of what the GSP is going to look like and what it's going to cover. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, any other board comment on the general manager's report? Okay, public comment? Anyone want to make a comment on his report? Questions, comments? Okay, I see none, then we will go on to the next item. And this would be, who has got that? Which staff has that? The fiscal impact regarding water resource manager participation in future PAC meetings.
Yeah, I'll start it off. I think there was a request from the PAC to have the water resource manager attend all their meetings, and I know that there's a concern about the budget with Stetson and what it would cost to be able to have Steve and his crew show up monthly for that meeting. I know that in talking to Steve, they had discussed the possibility of Stetson phoning in for those meetings, which would have a probably significant reduction in the cost of their participation. So we're bringing it to the board just for discussion and possibly a little bit of direction to Stetson and staff, and specifically allowing maybe Donna from PAC to weigh in on how she feels about maybe Steve and his staff calling in instead of showing up.
When I had asked for that, I thought it was not impossible to do it by phone rather than, but my concern is if you are here for the TAC meeting ends at 4 or or whenever it does. Usually it's about that time. And then you're back at 6 for the PAC meeting. You will be calling from your vehicle, I assume.
Either I will or somebody from my staff will. One of the two.
Okay, I don't want to put you in any danger or any of your staff in danger trying to answer questions and paying attention to what the PAC. And so I wanted us to look at the need. I thought it was definitely needed. 2, how we accommodate that need. And 3, how do we pay for it? So is that what we're, Donna, did you have comments you would like to make on that?
Well, we did discuss it at our last PAC meeting. We discussed an email that Steve sent to us addressing some of those issues. So he didn't give us exact costs, but he said it would either require an overnight stay or calling in by phone is possible, but he's usually traveling. And he said that he's very concerned about the GA costs and minimizing Stetson's cost. But at the same time, we've committed to the IWV GA as your WRM, essentially whatever that requires. So that was his response that we read, that we had in our packet for the August 2nd PAC meeting.
If I might, Chairman. As an example, the next PAC meeting I will be attending because we've scheduled to have Jim Markman there, and Jim's asked me to be there because he's going to talk about some important stuff, and there's some technical aspects he wanted me to be there for that. So, from my perspective, I'll do whatever is needed. I'll make that clear. It seems like it makes sense to try to attend the meetings that were needed, and there's a specific need to be there, and otherwise try to participate so we're keeping up on those meetings, whether it's me by phone or somebody else by phone. My wife will appreciate your concern about my driving because I'm not that good of a driver to begin with.
Well, you can't talk with your hands.
Yeah, you'd be really. Well, I can still do that.
Well, not while you're driving.
So, we'll do whatever works for the authority. I want to make sure Donna's concerns are addressed. I will be at the next PAC meeting, and as things come up that are important for us to be at, we would plan to be there. That was kind of our approach going forward so far. But the only thing we hadn't been doing is, regardless of whether there was something we thought was important to attend, to at least try to call in and have somebody participate so that we're at least a part of the discussion if a question comes up. So we could do that too.
I have to say, I'm concerned about you trying to drive. Equally, does it have to be you? I mean, do you have other staff that could do that could call in? The purpose is not to see your face. Yes. But to hear your voice and for you to hear them.
Yes, I have very good people that could call in. Okay. And that's what I plan to do.
And what does the board think of this?
That's a great idea. I trust his judgment, and I trust Donna to, when she has an issue that she feels is important, it merits his presence, to let him know and do the best job he can to maintain that relationship between the water resource manager and the PAC.
Agree.
Okay, so we are saying, sir, add it to your cost to do that?
Yep.
Is that what we're saying?
What I'm saying is, does it need a motion?
Does it?
No.
Okay, I'm just saying that there are going to be meetings that your presence is going to be important because you're going to contribute and you're going to be able to listen to what the people are saying. It's important for you to be there. Right. There are other times where presence is not critical, and you can supplement that with a phone call from one of your staffers, which is wonderful, making sure that you get an understanding of what the PAC is discussing, and there's a relationship between you and that PAC that is working and effective. Yep. So I would minimize the cost, not go when you don't have to, but be there on demand when it's required.
Okay. Good.
Okay, that's an understanding then, consensus of the board.
Yep.
All right, the next item.
Mayor, real quick.
Sir.
Just as a matter of process, in the future, I had the general manager read this after the last meeting because I was having difficulty communicating over the phone last meeting and had to leave at a certain point. But I would like, when we are being asked to provide direction or ultimately make decisions on certain things, that we kind of understand how that direction or decision will impact the overall budget. I mean, I appreciate the general discussion right now about being smart about how we utilize the water resource manager to not increase costs too much, but I really don't have any feel right now, because there was nothing provided in the background.
Well, they did
in terms of on this item in terms of what the potential impact, because actual cost would be, because I'm assuming this is not a budgeted cost right now, and so I need to understand when we're making decisions how that impacts the budget, whether it's something that we already accounted for, so we don't have to make that kind of decision when we're approving something, or is this something that wasn't conceived of in the budget at the time, so we have to be mindful of that impact.
It was not, but what if we ask Steve to say in two months to come back and give us a cost of what it took to accomplish those things we're asking you to do, and then we can give final approval based on that cost.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just my request last meeting was I'm just very used to seeing agenda items that have a specific section that says this is the financial impact of this action, and it's very basic language. It's not real detailed. It starts with, this is going to require additional discretionary money or not, and was it in the budget, or
Donna, you wanted to...
I thought there was an item in the budget for the groundwater pumping fees of $21,000 for, and I don't know if it was for just TAC or TAC and PAC meetings. So you might check that item in the extraction fee budget.
Okay.
Public comment at some point on this item?
We're going to, is there any future board comments on this item? Okay, Nick, please.
Nick Panzer, speaking not for the PAC, but as a member of PAC. Personally, I have not felt the need to have anyone from Stetson appear at the PAC meeting. It would be nice, but not necessary. What is missing for me is clear, precise tasking. Exactly what policy question does the resource manager want us to address? When does he want us to address it? When does he want an answer? And what resources will be provided to us? All of that can come in writing. He doesn't have to be there. We can all read it. To the extent we don't understand it, Chairman Thomas can meet with the resource manager, clarify things. But that's what I'm personally looking for, is clear, written, concise tasking. Thank you.
Thank you. You have been giving the chair direction similar to that, Donna? Is that?
Yes, he usually suggests the items for our PAC agendas, the upcoming agendas.
And I'm sure you have input to that, correct? Or maybe I'm not correct. You don't have any input to that?
Not usually.
Okay.
I mean, we've suggested some things in the past that have not been approved, so.
Can we make sure that both you and Donna understand that relationship, so we can make sure that both sides are heard and the PAC direction as well defined and understood? Okay? All right. All right, the next item.
I just have one question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you there, Renee.
It's about the cost factor. You're saying that there maybe really wasn't money put aside for PAC travel expenses for Stetson Engineering to send someone. What about the TAC? Was that automatically put in the budget? They had that, but not the PAC?
Yeah, that's correct. Early on, when when we got hired and we started attending these types of meetings, there was generally a consensus that we needed to be at the TAC meetings, but generally we didn't need to be at the PAC meetings unless it was something that was really needed. So we actually haven't been attending the PAC meetings, but we did budget in all of the TAC meetings because we generally make presentations at every at every TAC meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, was there any other public comment or questions on that item? Okay, then let's go to the next item, please. The report from the Technical Advisory Committee. Adam?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. This is the what we started calling the members' comments report that was put together. So it has a little bit more information that was identified by all of the different members for you all to know about, and then, of course, make your comments if needed. Those who attended for the first portion, everybody was there despite 2 absences. We will also discuss with Michelle Anderson if she can attend by a phone call and listening in. We think that's a great idea. Item number 2 is our public comments. 2 items, the request for status update on the KCWA water level progress was asked for, and the RCD memo regarding air quality and erosion was also provided. WRM, or Steve Johnson, requested that item 6A be moved up. We agreed, and therefore item 6A jumped forward with the WRM and TAC procedures. WRM presented the current understanding of the TAC procedures regarding voting, parking, reproduction cost reimbursements, and minutes. This was a long discussion that followed, but it resulted in 1, voting is okay as needed, but documentation of consensus or a lack thereof is important, and interactions encouraged at the GA meeting. 2, parking is still an issue and may not be resolved by moving to the county building, but that will be further discussed at another time. The GA has not authorized TAC reproduction cost reimbursement. However, the TAC will provide WRM with a list of documents for TAC member reproduction. TAC meetings are recorded as posted. The TAC summary comments and consensus is the new TAC report process or format and is acceptable. In addition, Mr. Decker indicated from his May 31st meeting 3 items unanimously voted on. They have not been addressed, and about 1/3 of his reports to the WRM have not been reported. WRM committed to address comments and individual written letters. Important items will go into this summary report. Next, item 3A, the GSP draft outline. WRM briefly reviewed format and content and requested TAC input. Some input provided, including the potential role of the brackish water. Plan is for TAC comment within 7 days. That was up to August 9th, and the GSP first draft outline will be released and revisited at the September TAC meeting. 3B, alternative imported water. Jeff with the WRM presented PowerPoint on the alternative imported water with focus on the AVEC treated water supply and LADWP banking or water exchange. Conceptual level costs were provided. TAC comments and prior Indian Wells Valley Water District GM reported on their prior work and its availability. WRM will follow up with Mr. Zadiba. A suggestion to consider local solar power exchange for supply was also made. Item 3C, the recyclable water. WRM report comments from TAC on a draft tech memo, which were due on August 10th, earlier if possible. Final draft tech memo will be released and posted. WRM reported on comments from the Navy. No facilities in draft planning should be located on the base. The WRM acknowledged aquifer depth connection, comments on non-native chub habitat, and possible 50-year payback instead of a 30-year on potential projects and reduced acre feet. For 3D, the ad hoc assignments, the TAC discussed potential ad hoc assignments such as sustainability and GDE, and will submit suggestions to the WRM. TAC discussed TSS projects, potential model runs, and brackish water. For our future agenda items, the TAC reviewed and added a review schedule for the GSP sections in distribution, DMS, and GSP outline. The future TAC dates, those were confirmed, including our modeling calibration ad hoc, which is coming up. And item 6, Part B, For the TAC announcements and comments, in general, the WRM reported that Attorney Markman is scheduled to make a presentation on water allocation processes at the September PAC meeting. WRM is coordinating with Markman and plans to be present. Attendance was encouraged for us as well. The WRM reviewed the TSS grant status. The general application has been submitted, stopping the clock, as we stated. WRM will be working with the TAC and others on identification of actual projects to submit to DWR on the TSS. And then we adjourn the meeting at 3:30.
Okay, is there any comments or questions from the board or staff to TAC?
I got one.
Yes.
Item 6A4, where Mr. Decker indicated three items we unanimously voted on have not been addressed. About 1/3 of these reports to the DWR have not been reported. Is this a cost issue that's going on? Are you responding to Mr. Decker, or are you responding to Mr. Decker through the chairman?
I'm doing both.
Okay, I'm not interested.
It's
in
not really a big
money,
cost issue. No.
Spending money from you to anybody, any Tom, Dick, and Harry. I need you to be working. We have a relationship with the TAC through him, which is effective and economical.
Yeah, we are working very well together.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, he is very much aware this discussion did happen, and I am also reporting it to all those here as well. So we did have a comment and also emails and a call. So.
Okay, so the answers were given to you on the items that you were looking for. Okay, the second one.
Yes.
The next.
Really quick, madam. Those that we wanted to verify that Mr. Decker indicated, Steve has also mentioned, just to verify that those are there, he will have those posted.
Yep. I don't doubt the value of the contributions at all. I'm just the process we need to streamline.
Yeah, that was worked out at this meeting.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
Speaking of streamlining, I'm not sure I understand why we read this. Every meeting we come, we read your minutes. So we have a written report and we have an oral report. What's the value of the oral report? Can we not have those and just reduce the time we spend on this meeting, or is that necessary?
That's up to you all for the GA. I'm happy to be here to reduce any comments, questions, or sit here available if you have questions, and I'm happy to answer those for you on the TAC side.
What is the direction of the board? I have no problem. One of the things that I would ask, I think we had said before, the things like it adjourned at 3:30 or those kind of things. Just give us the full report so we have it and the public has access to it. But give us the things that affect the okay, that's it. Thank you. The meat of what you did. Thank you. I'm not saying that the rest of this is unimportant because I want to see it. But if you could just verbally give us, so if some of the public or any of the people watching don't have this, they will be able to understand what truly happened. Is that a doable thing?
I think that's a very doable thing.
Okay, what about?
It, in essence, takes everything that's listed here, but then reduces them to the important points that we are available. I'm available to respond if you have any comments and questions. But then everything else, of course, is available to the public, and I've already done that downwork with Stetson on that. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, Peter wants to make a comment.
I'm going to go for a record of number of questions at one meeting. Anyways, first off, I love your melodious voice.
I heard that. You are set. Oh, you are welcome.
Anyways, I think the value is when you read it or when you go over the meat, that is specifically for the people that aren't here and don't get this information, but they want to know, maybe really importantly or just partially. But when you verbalize it like that, I think that's very valuable for people. Yeah. Even for me, I read stuff, and when you say it, sometimes they learn something new. So I'm for reading or reporting the meaty stuff, and I think it's a good practice. And whether it takes us 15 more minutes, if I just stop talking, we could make that up. So.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, sir?
I just wanted to make a quick one. I mean, when you look at the minutes, you guys started at 10 a.m. and you didn't finish till 3:30. So appreciate that investment of time. It's 5.5 hours. So well done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, this one was at the 10 o'clock meeting. Did I have, or excuse me, the 1 o'clock?
The 1
did
o'clock
I put 10?
meeting. 1 to 3:30.
That's an additional 0. That is my mistake. 1
I take back what I said then,
p.m.
apparently.
Okay.
Sometimes I can't help that honesty, sir. But
All right, any other board comments?
Can I just mention? I'm sorry, just to mention one thing. I think, because I told Donna I would mention this. Some folks are sometimes wondering about what we're doing on the GSP and the coordination with the Brackish Water Group. I want to make sure everybody's aware that we had our second, I guess it was our second, really our second, Brackish Water, DRI, Stetson coordination call this week on Tuesday. I thought it went very well. Our goal and our commitments are the same, and that's to make sure all the technical information that's available is available and is included in the model and in our GSP. So we are working together.
I had asked for that for this last meeting, and I'd like to ask you to, you and the Brackish Water Group, if you would come. Don't give us everything. Just tell us what's happening and let us understand where you're attempting to go and how we're going to get there.
I think next meeting will be a good meeting for that.
Very good. We want to hear that. Sir.
Well, on the question of the TAC meeting minutes, I think we could streamline these meetings with a summary and questions from the board and public concerning the content.
Good.
Excellent.
Okay, no other comments on the TAC report? Oh, was there? Okay, the next one is the PAC. Please, Donna.
We had 8 voting PAC members at our August 16th meeting. And we did receive 2, well, I, as chair, received 2 email messages of personal communication, which I read to the committee members and the public in attendance. A letter of resignation from the PAC committee representative, Carol Wilson, who represented business interest, Ridgecrest Area Association of Realtors. And I would like to thank Carol for her participation. And then a response from Lorelei Oviatt to questions that I sent to her based on the July 12th PAC discussion regarding full well registration. And I do have a copy of her response in the packet, in the agenda packet for this meeting. She did suggest that Amy Rutledge at the Kern County Environmental Health Department might be able to supply information to well owners who are searching for information about their wells. And she said, check the website for their address, and I did, which is 2700 M Street, Suite 300, Bakersfield, 93301-2370. Discussion regarding recommendations from PAC members regarding ad hoc committee reports on the POAM input. So I attached the report from Nick Panzer, Wes Katzenstein, and David Janis, who provided additional information from Nick reviewing sustainable management criteria from the Code of Regulations. So they did give a one-page report on items from the POAM that they thought deserved particular attention from the PAC. Ultimately, the committee member vote was 6-2 for the ad hoc report. It was approved for recommendation to the board with one change in item 1A, change the word from prioritize groundwater uses to identify groundwater uses. Agenda item 5, an ad hoc committee report on options for additional GSA funding sources and grants. So I attached the reports. Each of us on the committee did a partial part of the report. So Steve Goddard, Renee Westalusk, and myself, our reports are attached in the packet agenda. And that committee report was unanimously approved by PAC voting members for recommendation to the board. Steve Goddard, assisted by David Janis, reported on the funding for water security at NAWS China Lake in the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. Renee Westelusk reported on U.S. Bureau of Reclamation smart water proposals, EPA WIFIA funding, and low-interest loans. And also she provided many pages from the Proposition 3 proposal to be voted upon on the November 2018 ballot. And that's all attached in the packet. Proposition 3, she noted, authorizes bonds to fund projects for water supply and quality, watershed, fish, wildlife, water conveyance, and groundwater sustainability and storage. I prepared handouts for the small ag and large ag PAC representatives, specifically regarding funding from SB 5 for farmers and ranchers through programs from the California Department of Food and Agriculture, CDFA for State Water Efficiency and Enhancement Program called SWEEP, and Healthy Soils Program, HSP. I also prepared a list of funding opportunities from the California Rural Water Association, Southern California Edison Foundation, Inyamona Integrated Regional Water Management Group, and a list of things from the CVCC booklet from their website. Mainly, we were recommending that we look at CRWA and the SCE Foundation for funding for the purchase of water meters and coverage of installation costs for the meters to serve as incentives for de minimis users, subject to the approval and application by the IWV GA board and staff. At the bottom of the page are potential funding sources from California Financing Coordinating Committee with page numbers and contact names for potential projects. And some of those listed included water marketing funding ideas. These, of course, are all just potential for your file to decide what you might want to pursue. And perhaps we're a little early in our recommendations. You might want to do that more after your plan is more developed. But we were asked to do this task, so we did our best. We did say the grants portion will meet again to discuss foundation funding potentials. We've addressed the WRM participation in the PAC meetings and the outreach strategy for DAC involvement. We'd like to do that more in depth at a future meeting, probably after or just before the RFPs go out for those two Prop 1 DAC proposals. We also talked about perhaps inviting Holly Alpert to our PAC meeting, who could address and present information on DAC involvement and also talk with us about upcoming integrated regional water management funding cycles. On the recycled water tech memo, we talked about it somewhat, but we did decide to ask each individual PAC member to make any comments before the August 10th deadline. Agenda item 9, future agendas. We discussed Steve's list of suggested items for the upcoming meetings. And September 6th, there will be only one item on the agenda, and that's a presentation by Special Counsel Mr. Markman regarding water allocations. And I believe we're going to try to make arrangements to have that meeting here in the council chambers because more people might be.
Staff if we could do that.
Yes, we talked to Rick about that this morning. So, under committee announcements, David Janis announced that newspaper articles would follow the next day as a result of a press conference regarding the NDAA passage by both the House and the Senate. And it has now been signed by the President. And I presented a letter from Eastern Kern County RCD requesting that the IWVGA address air quality, fugitive dust, blowing sand, soil erosion, prevention, as well as restoration and reclamation issues in the IWV GSP. We adjourned at 8:30.
Okay, Donna, there was a couple of things you said I have some questions on. I was going to ask, again, staff if we can have the PAC and the TAC meeting here that night. So if we will follow up on that. And you said there was some things, questions that you needed Steve to answer. Were those answered?
Yes, I believe so.
Are there things you're lacking from us other than those requests you just made from the minutes?
I don't think so.
The only one I had asked Eddie Thomas, he is a councilman in the city here, and he serves as the city's representative on the East Kern Air Pollution Control District, and I asked him to follow up on that with that board, and I know Zach sits on that too, does he still? And so Zach would be somebody to follow up. We weren't sure exactly. I told him I did not know where you were coming from on this issue other than dust in the air from fallow property. Is that it?
Right. Depending
Okay.
on reductions in water allocations and taking
Okay.
fields out of production, whatever, those types of issues.
Okay. Is there other questions or comments from the board regarding Donna's report? Is there any comments that you'd like to make, Donna? Anything else? Is there anything you have asked for that you haven't gotten?
I don't think at this point that I can think of anything. However, it looks as if the task to the PAC for the next couple of meetings at least through September and October are to deal more specifically with the issue of water allocations or pumping allocations. That's a majority of the agenda. Well, it is the whole agenda for the September 6th meeting, and I think it's the majority of the items that were sent to me regarding the October meeting.
I don't have any problems if you look at that from a water usage point of view either, identifying the uses rather than saying you get this and you get that, because I don't think that is your job. Frankly, I think that's is going to fall on our shoulders and the legal shoulders and staff's shoulders. But I would like to see, that's what we had first asked, if you could look at that and see how we're going to get there. Talk about that, identify those uses, because that is the most important job probably you're going to come up with, is to identify all the uses and how we find enough water to meet all those uses. Maybe not how, but identify. You're not going to make those decisions. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to put that on your shoulders.
No. I think it might be helpful to the PAC if we had some sort of a presentation on the sustainable groundwater management criteria as set forth in the DWR November brochure, I think. But, just to have a general background of those issues before we begin making recommendations on
Can we make that happen?
Policies.
Staff, can we make that happen?
We can. We actually did make a presentation on sustainable management criteria from DWR at the last TAC meeting, so I can provide that to Donna.
Yeah, that would be good. That's a shorter form, and that would be good to send out to the PAC
and
members.
that can be apply for the next PAC meeting.
Okay.
Got it there.
Okay, is there any other comments on the PAC report? Okay, then we will, do we know if that Thursday, I know it's the third Thursday at 6 o'clock. Is that the same night
No.
as the school board meets?
September 6th meeting?
I'm sorry, you're right. I got it wrong. Okay, we'll find out. Okay, General Manager's report.
Yes, ma'am. Just a little update that staff is currently working with the county on the building lease for the old Department of Health building on Ridgecrest Boulevard. We're also looking at establishing a bank account now that we're looking at receiving the pumping fee funds. We're working with staff and developing a procedure and process to make that happen. And obviously, if we're looking at hiring a GA administrator here in the near future, we're more than likely going to have to start looking at some general liability insurance for the GA. So those are the things we're going to be working on over the next month or two to start securing those items and bringing some of those issues back to the board for approval.
Any questions or comments? Okay, the next item is closing comments. How do you want to start? Anybody want to start?
Oh. I can start.
All right, you start. I've got some. You can start. We'll all go.
Okay. I promise this will be my last statement. Anyways, so a while back I submitted some questions, notated budget items to examine. In light of Steve's great announcement and reiteration of that, maybe that we actually don't have to have matching funds. I'd like somebody to answer those points that I've imagined in the budget. So what I was doing was I was working on the other side of the equation. I hate these mics. Anyways, there, now I sound better. What I wanted to do is just, and I was hoping the TAC might look at it, but I was just looking at the dollars for the items, and I know that some of those dollars are services in kind that you've already done. But I wanted to look at and evaluate the necessity and the ability to outsource those specific line items. And for instance, the stream gauges, I know there's a private entity out there that said, we'll just do it for you guys. And so there you go. We just nixed that one off. I know I'm talking in an ultra simplistic fashion, but I just wanted to address those things that I notated to a logical conclusion, and then I actually had some points. The good thing is I think I had like 10 points. We've already answered over half of those in our regular meetings. So if somebody could just, you could just talk to me or, whatever. But this was part of my due diligence for my board on how efficient we are. And it's not a reflection on anything except for I've been around a while historically. Oh, they already left. Can't make fun of that anymore. So I have all this knowledge of what we've already done. I've sat on the cooperative since it was invented, and I already know about weather stations for the BLM and yada yada. So if somebody could give me their technical advice, feedback on those notated items, if we already have them, or if we don't have them, how can we do them outsource-wise, where it fits your need and your responsibility level? Because I understand the need for the data, the train of data to come from you, et cetera. But if they've already been vetted or peer-reviewed or whatever, to me that would be sufficient. So if I could get a response on that, that would be great. And then the other thing is the finance committee meeting. My board, my entire board, would really like to see a finance committee. I actually was pushing that forever. Then I actually changed my mind because I came up with the justification to not have one. And that was, well, we only have one source of income coming in and one source of income coming out. And, and we have the POAM, which is really detailed, which is like a master plan, or for us, our general plan. And in my mind, my personal mind, a finance committee covers ops and, things like that. Planning in the future, ops, cash flow. I wouldn't mind seeing like a CPA or somebody that actually gives us the financial report, because I'm used to a P&L statement and a balance sheet, like a regular one. That way I can keep track of the asset, and I know where the money is, etc. So on that Finance Committee note, I'm not opposed to it. My board absolutely wants it. But before we do one, if we ever do one, I want to actually have it very defined what the function is. Because if you form a committee and then you go, what do we do? Well, that doesn't seem right, you know? And so one of my board members said, well, you're going to get multiple sources of income now. And I go, yeah, that's right. So, you know, I start out with an idea and it changes as people give me information. So if we do have one, then I'd like to know exactly what its purpose will be. And if you say applying for grants, I don't agree with that. I think we go out to an outsource and stuff like that. But if we do I want the function to be beneficial to this, us, the GSA. And then the other thing is what was I going to say? I just lost my train of thought. That's really unusual. What was it? Oh, it's killing me. It was you, Adam. You looked at me the wrong way.
That'll do it.
Gosh, I'll have to come back because it just escaped me.
I'll look at you another way.
Oh, my goodness sakes. Sorry about that. I'll get back to the last item, and I'll remember it in a minute.
Okay. Sir, did you have anything? Nick?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks. I want to appreciate Pete for those words about the Finance Committee. I had my own thoughts about it, and she had some of those with Peter real quick this morning, but not thoroughly. So I want to talk about two things I want to talk about. First is the Finance Committee. In my opinion, we don't need it. I just think it is a function that is going to be to bog us down. It's going to be an impediment to efficient movement in this group. And by definition, we are a Finance Committee, and that's why our primary responsibility is to manage and act like a Finance Committee where we're looking at and examining our financial strategy, which has been well developed in the POA&M and all the associated costs with that. I just don't think that having a financial committee would help us in some of the instances where we have tentative, sensitive relationships that are just beginning in certain areas that have finances attached to them. Where we have a committee now that's going to have to be a Brown Act compliant body that's going to have knowledge of those relationships where they would fail. I mean, the relationships would not develop because there are people who don't want to comply with the Brown Act outside of our board. They just don't want to work in a public sphere. They want to work behind the scenes, and having a Finance Committee may impede that on occasion. I think we have a financial strategy. I think we have board members who are ad hoc Finance Committee, and I think we can assign them. But if we were to have a Finance Committee, that would mean that one out of the three of us would have to be a member of it. Could be two of us.
Well, it's been Peter and Mr. Page.
Right. But if we have a formal committee, there's going to have to be Brown Act compliant. We're going to have a lawyer. We're going to have a water resource manager, some level, participate in the Finance Committee. It's a cost that is going to drive. I don't know what that cost is, but I imagine it's going to be significant. I don't know that I have a lawyer that's going to be capable of doing that. I don't know that you're going to have a lawyer that's capable of doing that. I don't know how that's all going to work out. Essentially, I think we don't need it, which is my fundamental deal, my fundamental reason. We have presently 3 sources of revenue. Right now, we have 3 sources of revenue. We have a fairly simple problem, not simple in context. It's a simple problem that we have when you look at other basins. We have 3 sources of income. We have the charity that's been given to us by the Water District. Thank you very much. The charity that's been given to us by Kern County, and the financial contributions, the buy-in from other agencies. That's one source. We have a Prop 1 grant funding that's well identified, it's associated, it's task-oriented, it's well-defined and well-captured, as we heard today. Our third source of revenue is a pumping fee. Those are our sole 3 sources of revenue. This is not a very complex revenue stream that we're looking at. We have primarily 2 expense centers of cost centers. We have a water resource manager, and who's on contract, and we have a lawyer, Mr. Markman, who we haven't even used really yet too much. So we have 3 ways of getting money in, 2 ways essentially of putting it out there in terms of a contract employees. We have no property. We have no employees. We have very little complexity in our organization, and we have one task order. And that one task order is to develop a GSP. So I think having a committee of people that is going to honcho and walk over and look over everything we do, I don't think it is conducive to success and efficiency and being able to expedite actions that we need to have expedited. I think we, by definition, are 5 members or 7 members. We are a finance committee. We have a financial strategy. I enjoyed, Peter, your perspective, which is much more than mine, in terms of really nailing down what's important and what's not important in a business plan, right, because of your experience. And I enjoy listening to you talk like that, because you're putting the nails to our water resource manager, making sure that he's doing it correctly, and that's exactly what we need. I hear, the problem we have is that I think I heard Mr. Rotorua come up months ago saying that we need a finance committee, and I thought I responded, but I didn't respond looking back on it. And I respect Mr. Rotorua immensely, and I wanted to comment. I wish I'd commented earlier on his thoughts, that I disagree with them. I appreciate them, I respect them, but I disagree with them. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that your boards, I understand, are sensitive to this issue. But, this is our issue. It's not their issue. This is an issue for this board to grapple with, not those boards to grapple with.
Well, we're representing our board.
Yes, that's for you to be sensitive to your board. I understand, like I'm sensitive to mine,
yeah,
and you're sensitive to yours. I got it. I appreciate it. But we need to make that decision, and I'm hopeful that we're all considering that. So I think our primary job now is finances. And I think we have a finance committee. If we wanted to say, okay, let's dedicate some time every third Thursday, this meeting where we come in earlier, 5 of us come in earlier and have a presentation by some finance, a CPA, which I like that idea, where we come in an hour earlier than the board meeting and we just say, let's talk finances for an hour by this board, us right here, I'd be inclined to go along with that. I think that might prove valuable. So part of it I like.
I think quarterly. That was what I forgot. Sorry. I forgot my last train of thought, and then I derailed. It was quarterly. I think the finance committee, to save time and to save resources, quarterly would be sufficient.
So maybe not, instead of a finance committee, maybe you go back to your boards and offer them a something where we complete their desired objective. We hit the numbers that they're looking for in terms of get their satisfaction, and at the same time we retain an efficient, effective, flexible, and a body that can act independently in financially responsible manner. That would be my recommendation to the Finance Committee issue, and I appreciate Mr. Rotorua and everybody else coming, because it made me think. I'm sorry I didn't respond earlier. Second thing I want to talk about is, and the last thing is independence. I think we need to be an independent body. We're getting there. It's painful. I understand that. It's going to be painful in the future. It's just the way it is. We have, so many bodies having so many opinions, and everybody's got, we have 16 masters. We have way too many chefs in the kitchen, but we're moving in a way that that's slowly, methodically getting through this and developing this GSP in a timely fashion. I think I've worked hard at trying to get this body independent from Kern County. I'm not totally independent, but pushing it away from having an undue influence on the workings of this body. And I think I've been successful. I know we all have. One of those ways is the building we have, getting this building. I think this building is incredible. It's a signal. It's more so than just a building, and I don't care about the park, and we can worry about that later. I do care about having a signal with a sign in front saying, whatever the sign say, Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. And we have an independent building, so I'm looking forward to making that happen, because that further gets us away from undue influences from the county, any city, and any water district. I just think that's imperative to our success, and that's a big move. I agree with the liability issues. I know you're working through them, and I also know that we have some leads on some good ways to get those liabilities, and we're working with you closely on that. So independence. Independence is big. That's our first step in independence. Another step is the general manager, and I know that we've had conversations about that. And I think it's imperative that we get a general manager assigned, our first employee, who will task orders from all of us. So I don't have to go to Ron and say, Peggy, I'm going to go to ask Ron, is it okay if I ask Ron to go do this? Are you doing that to Alan last year, or all that stuff? We have a staff that we all go to, and he's loyal to all of us, primarily. That's his job, not to other places. I understand the sensitivity about, from the Water District, that they'd like to have a run at that. I get that, and I'm okay with that.
I think if you just change the name to administrator.
Yeah, okay.
I think that would ease tension.
Okay, and then we can phase out over a period of time throughout the next year.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I think we'll be autonomous once we're self-funding.
That's good. So I think that's another area where we need to create independence. And the last area is from the Navy. I'm so thankful we have the Navy. They're such an integral part of our community, who we are. But I also think we need independence from the Navy. And the reason I say this is because we are in the middle of creating a modeling. We're modeling the valley, the basin. And there's a relationship. The Navy's been so good to us by giving us this in-kind solution of several $100,000, and we've leveraged it, and we're very thankful we got it. But it's important that we take the next step, which is to be independent and act as an independent body that the Navy can have full confidence in, protect their interests, protect our interests, and still achieve the desired effect that we're all looking for. So I think we also need to look for independence from that area. And I would suggest that in this modeling scenario that we're, the DRI model that we've been using, and how we're using it and how often we use it, I think we need to be in control of our own future. We need to craft our own way ahead and not be dependent on any particular body, whether that's city, district, county, or the Navy. So I'm looking forward to developing a relationship with the Navy so that they can understand what our thoughts are in terms of independence and our need for independence, and their understanding of what they need in order to protect their investments and to make sure they're fully protected. So I'd like to have that conversation. I'd just like to start that conversation. I know that with the Navy. And we'll figure out the right place. I think it's something that the TAC can take a role in. I think the TAC can take a leadership role in. We'll see how that goes, but I would like to make a recommendation that to this board and ask for your permission, unless there's anyone who objects, that we begin to design that, and I can take the first lead in at least getting that because of who I am. I understand the Navy better than most of us, and I understand a lot of stuff, and I can help in that area of creating that independence from the Navy while preserving their integrity and achieving ours. So those are my two thoughts. Stan, sorry about not getting back to you on the Finance Committee. I wish I had done that sooner. I personally, I don't know where this board's going to go, but I don't like it. And independence, I think we need a building quickly. I think we need an administrator. And I think we need to achieve independence from all our bodies. Thank you very much.
Sir?
I just had a quick question. The presentation that was provided earlier at the beginning of the meeting was not part of the agenda packet. It's not on the website yet, but I didn't know whether the gentleman who had made it, had they provided a copy of the presentation so we can post it on the website?
Was it on the agenda?
It is. No, he's saying that.
I'm saying yes. It was agendized, but there was the slides were not in the agenda packet.
Got it.
I think they were provided electronically, but either way, we will get them and make sure that
They
they're
brought
posted.
it up here this morning.
Oh, they did.
So we have it here.
We have it here.
Did they leave it with us?
He's giving you a thumbs up.
We got it.
Yes.
So
Okay.
we'll get it up. That's good. Yep.
I'm glad you can see that. Okay. All right. I have a couple of comments. I was going to bring up the budget again. I know I've asked for it a few times. I will state it this way. I would like to us then, since you guys came up with the idea of meeting maybe every quarter, have a meeting with everyone here every quarter up front ahead of the meeting, so that those who do not wish to come and sit for an hour or two ahead of time can be a part of that and understand where we're going. I also want to add this in. Last meeting, Chip and RC&D were here and offered their assistance. I really, really, really like that idea. I like the idea of them being able to do things perhaps at a reduced rate if Steve finds a need for them or can find an ability to accomplish it in a more expedient manner. And some of it was they had even talked about going out and seeing some of the well owners and talking to them. I know it's important and we can define that a little bit more fully, but they also talked about looking for grants. Well, right now I know we're not going to find any grants to build a plan. We've already got that, but as we continue the process to serve, I think they may prove helpful, and I would like us to follow through with that. And if indeed some of those I don't want to make them sound like they're unimportant tasks, because nothing is, but that it doesn't need your staff to do, Steve. If they can look into that, how you can utilize their services. And they're local, they understand the community, and I don't know that there is, but I know we'll never find out if we don't look. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk, I did ask for the brackish water. I'm still having trouble understanding how we get from here to there. I saw the preliminary draft GSP outline. I guess I need it to be explained a little bit more fully to me, and I would like if you can just, for us, I don't need to know the technical issues. I want to know just how we do it. How do we get from here we are, here is the plan, DWR, here is the plan, and then where do we go? I'd like to see it defined a little bit more fully. I know you've done it in the poem, and I like the idea, but I would like it explained in not such little print, how we get there. And if that shows a lack of, it is not a lack of trust in that you're going to get us there, I just want to know how. Okay, that's the end of mine. Is there any other comments?
Madam Mayor, did you want to discuss the MSA?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yes, and I also, yes, I did. I did say I was, after last night, how I could, I don't know. I even have it right here, city. Last night at the city council meeting, we approved an MSA, an amendment with 3 items to our MSA with the Shoshone tribe. And part of it was water, and there had been requests for that, and what our staff, and would you explain how staff proceeded with this, Keith, and then give us the data on what it says?
Sure. There was a couple issues that where sort of life had changed since the original MSA was signed, and I guess we were tasked with trying to come up with an agreement with the tribe on those items. The one that's relevant to this body is the issue of water. The original MSA was silent on that topic, but since the MSA was signed, it's become much more in everybody's mind. So the tribe, as I understand it, its plan is if they eventually buy property here and eventually want to put a business in a casino, their plan is to seek water hookup with the water district, as I understand it. Obviously, that's between them and the water district, whatever happens at that point. There was a concern about, well, what if they instead decide to put a well in and start exporting water from the basin or what have you? Now, obviously, as we know, and I'm sure Jim Markman will tell you that GSA's jurisdiction over the tribe would be limited because they've got sovereign immunity or sovereign rights as a tribe, much like the federal government does. So the goal here was to sort of resolve that issue. And again, this is an agreement between the city and the tribe, not the tribe and the GSA. So it's a little awkward. But so it may or may not have been the right forum, but we thought since we had this opportunity, we would take a shot at it. So what we did was we added some language to the agreement that says in the event that they do try to use groundwater as part of any land that they eventually purchase, particularly in relation to the casino, that they would be subject to the jurisdiction of the GSA, and that the GSA would have the right to enforce that part of the agreement. So that's all it says. It doesn't bind the GSA to take any particular action regarding the tribe. It doesn't guarantee the tribe has any access to any water greater or different than anybody else does who's a property owner. But they would be at that point a property owner in the basin, and they would, then be subject to the GSA's rules.
Address the fact that they were willing to give up their sovereign immunity to the GSA.
Yeah, the only way
texted that with
the only way this could work is for them to waive sovereign immunity when it came to that level of regulation, which is something that, my understanding is, Indian tribes are very loath to do, because they're basically subjecting themselves to your whim later on if they come forward and make a proposal. But they were willing to do that. They're working so hard to cooperate with us that they're actually willing to do that, much to the surprise of some people. So I see this as very good news for the GSA. In the event that you end up with this tribe in the community, if that happens, then unlike every other community in the state, you actually have the ability to regulate their water use to some extent.
I would like you to say, too, we talked to 3 different attorneys, you,
right,
and Mr. Markman, and the city has a tribal specialist attorney who looked at it and agreed that the city was protected. The GSA was involved peripherally, but was not a party to that. I think you call it a third party
beneficiary.
Thank you.
We just wanted to make that clear so that in the future, if the tribe started doing something with the groundwater without consulting with the GSA would then have the right under the to enforce the MSA against them, and that sort of the logic of that. Again, now somebody said, "Well, why didn't you guys bring it to the GSA first before you did this?"
Oh God, yeah.
And I'm sure you guys would be very eager to have as many casino issues in front of you as you can. But the answer to that is the GSA is not a party to the agreement. So, and the GSA certainly could enter into some agreement with the tribe in the future about this if you want. And, there's also issues, I think, with the tribe and the county that probably need to get worked out eventually too. But those are separate agreements. This is just the deal with the city and what the city was requiring for the city to grant them a municipal services agreement. The city was saying, if we're going to do that, then you need to be subject to the GSA's groundwater rules. That was essentially what we demanded of them. You guys can demand other things. That's a story for another day.
Okay. We just wanted to fill you in so you understood that we were not asking your permission. We were giving you information and that telling you that of your third-party beneficiary and the fact that they would give up their sovereign immunity to this.
Yeah, and I guess I should say, if it's not already clear, the city's MSA does not bind the GSA in any way, shape, or form to anything, and it can't. And so this doesn't commit the GSA to do anything regarding the tribe that's consistent or inconsistent with the MSA. This is just something that the city was requiring if the city was going to do business with the tribe.
Okay. Is there any questions or comments? Peter?
I'm always putting my finger that this is all I want to say. Maybe I should say like that, or maybe I should be like you.
Just say it, Peter.
All right. Sorry.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you. I came to last night's meeting, unfortunately. I think it was 5.5 hours, I think. Anyways, I'm still trying to remember what happened, but I was impressed. The fact that you went that extra mile for us, I appreciate. I thought it was brilliant, and it does help settle what we would think might happen in the future. And any time you can do something ahead of time like that, so much the better. The fact that they're in agreement, awesome. But I just want to say thank you. That was a lot of work, and we all get to be the recipients of that. So, and I've never heard of anybody letting any part of their sovereign rights away, because by virtue of being sovereign, you don't have to. So that was amazing. So thank you.
Thank you for your compliment after me yelling at you. So thank you. Okay, anybody else? Any other comments? Okay, then we will adjourn to closed session. Thank you. We will see you all hopefully at the TAC and PAC meeting, hopefully here. We'll let you know. Thank you.